start our formal program, I'd ask Kepa, and he very reluctantly, but I asked him if he would start us off with a pule.
Two folks were generationally attached to the island of Oahu, and they believed that we were a part of something rather than apart from it. That the earth around us, that everything from the stars in the heavens, the depths of the ocean, everything was alive and was a part of the family. So they always taught us, offer a prayer first, knowing ask permission before even stepping upon the land or before embarking on some endeavor, and along the way be mindful. Knowing, ask permission. Don't just expect that it's your right. Two folks taught us healthy land, healthy people. And so we take care of the island, they take care for us. And I think a lot of the Kanaka and our Ohana here grew up with those things. So I'm going to offer up today that we be inspired this evening by the island, even though it's covered with cement here. We have a blessing on some of our island that is still a natural place. So we're going to asking that the land be blessed, that we be blessed here, that our minds and our hearts be joined together for the righteousness, the goodness, and the that this sovereignty, this breath of life be experienced by all of us, and that it will inspire us to good decisions. And Tutu Papa said, keep the good, set the bad aside, and if I do make a mistake or offend you, I ask that you let it go and forgive me. Ola kupono, ona kanaka, ona lahui, pai mai le ke mau o kawai, pai ai o kawai. E ho mai o kane hurere manu o mako maka e atau. E ha mai o ha aroka. Apo mai o ia mako i ora e hiki a mako ke vehe tomana o kupono e ho'oroho me kupono ua I mai o tutuma lohu ki o ke kuni kumaka a kono no ke mau mea I a koko me ke iha e lohu I kupono no ka ai no ka la hui kawai no ka na no olo ka ai ina hewa mako hui kalu mai o ia mako e kumako e uia ina hewa hui kalu mai o ia Nau kalani kalani me kapamu ako maya mako makai no kau ke kinigo Yesu Kristo. Amen. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Kepa. Again, thank you for being here tonight. This is the Department of Energy's public scoping on the proposed draft programmatic environmental impact statement. I just want to briefly go over what tonight's agenda is going to be, and then we'll move into the formal presentations. First, we're going to start off with a brief introduction of the panel members, as well as the federal public scoping process and the environmental impact process. Then there'll be an opportunity for questions and answers. I will tell you, we really heard you the last time we were here. Many of you expressed great frustration in the process that it wasn't engaging, that you were not able to ask questions and get answers. So tonight, the process is going to include an opportunity for you to ask questions, and the panel will try to address them. The questions will be hopefully about the process and about any questions during the presentation. And the primary purpose of tonight's meeting will be the formal scoping. It will be asking you, what is it that we should be including in the programmatic EIS? And there will be a comment period, there will be a court reporter sitting at the table here, taking all of those comments, and then there will be a transcription of those formal comments. So, some minor logistic issues. There are some light refreshments, water in the back. There's emergency exits at both sides. The restrooms are outside behind the cafeteria. And there are several sign-in sheets. There's one sign-in sheet at the table which records those of you who have attended. There will be another sign-in sheet if you want to get future information about the programmatic EIS, or when there will be different, the future public meetings. So please sign up with your information, how you would like us to contact you. And then third, there will be a sign-up sheet for people who want to make a comment and come up to the microphone and state your comment for the record. So please, I know there's a lot of sign-up sheets, but take the opportunity to complete those. We would really appreciate that. One final issue, logistical issue, is that we have to vacate this room, I believe, by 9 o'clock. So that means the most important part of this is we want to make sure we get your comment. So I hope you will give me permission to help to move the meeting along so that everybody is going to have an opportunity to give their comment. So please, if I offend anybody by asking you to summarize your comments or your question, it really is for purposes of ensuring that everybody has an opportunity to give their comment. One final matter, we have a court reporter. Not everybody feels comfortable coming up to the microphone and stating their comments in public. But it is nonetheless important that we get their comment. So if any of you want to give a comment during the presentation, we have a court reporter who is sitting behind the posters to the left of the room, and she is available to any of you who would like to give your statement or your comment and have it part of the record. Because what I want to be very clear about is managing your expectations. During the presentation and during the question and answers, those are not part of the formal scoping meeting process. Those comments will not be on the record, but if you go to the court reporter and you put your comment on the record, that's going to be on the record. So any of you feel free to go in the back, make your comment during the formal comment period. She's going to come up to the front of the room and take everybody's comments. So with that, I want to introduce Jane Somerset. Jane is with the Department of Energy, and she is managing this process. And I'd like to, Jane, if you want to begin the formal presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you for agreeing to join us here tonight, for taking time out of your lives and your schedules. We appreciate it very much because it's your input and your involvement that makes this process of value, both to the Department of Energy and to the state of Hawaii and the community. And I work for the Department of Energy, and my role in this process is the federal document manager in developing the programmatic environmental impact statement. Don just went over this. Okay. Our vision for this document, the Hawaii Clean Energy Programmatic EIS, is to look at a very broad range of energy activities and renewable energy technologies. We want to evaluate potential environmental impacts and benefits. We want to identify potential mitigation measures and best practices. We wish to incorporate public input on all of these aspects of all of these activities and how they can be dealt with early in the process, not after the project is chosen. It's an informational resource. Why a Hawaii Clean Energy PEIS? Well, as all of you know better than I do, despite the fact that Hawaii is the third least user of energy resources among states, we're the most petroleum-dependent state in the United States. Petroleum is used both for electricity and for transportation. And as a state evaluation, Hawaii has the highest energy costs in the United States. These are major issues for the state to deal with. There are economic issues, there are security issues, there are sustainability issues. So back in 2008, in January, the state of Hawaii and the U.S. Department of Energy signed a memorandum of understanding, entering into a partnership to try to together figure out how the state could deal with these issues. The Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative has come out of this partnership, and its goal is 70% clean energy by 2030, an ambitious goal. Now, the Department of Energy, over the past, has assisted the state of Hawaii to support clean energy in a number of ways. We have supported technical and research activities. We have full-time staff here, including Jim Spade, who I'm looking for, yes, the Department of Energy's representative here in Hawaii. And we have potential future DOE funding issues and opportunities coming up. We believe, we have every reason to believe, although there's nothing specific in the works now. And we're looking for a way to better understand and make better informed decisions about these opportunities. And you know what? Having just identified Jim, where's the rest of my panel? Let me introduce you before we go on any further. Jim Spade from the Department of Energy. He's our technical lead here in the state of Hawaii. Mark Eckenrode of the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. Following Elizabeth Rockaway. And Mark Lipp from the state of Hawaii, the DVAC organization. I'm very sorry, he was sitting there, and so I just whizzed right into the presentation. So, Mark, I'm going to ask you to talk on the next two slides about Hawaii and the clean energy initiative.
Thank you, Jane. Aloha. I want to assure you that it wasn't part of our planning efforts to include the entertainment next door, as enjoyable as it is. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the State Energy Office and its role in energy planning and the reason why we're involved in this. Back in 1974, the legislature designated the director of the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism as the Energy Resources Coordinator. And among, not only including planning, but dealing in case of emergencies, particularly market emergencies, and working with civil defense on energy emergencies. A whole series of energy policies were developed shortly thereafter, and a lot of it talked about sustainability, self-sufficiency. Understanding the devastating impact on our economy and our people because of the amount of imported oil, imported energy. Throughout the years, by 2001, the whole notion of indigenous sources of energy led to some goals. And the first renewable portfolio standard was established in 2001. In 2004, the Hawaii Energy Policy Forum had an energy summit. That summit explored all kinds of energy solutions. And by 2008, there was a historic agreement in which the state of Hawaii partnered with the Department of Energy to combine resources, leverage resources towards seeking very aggressive standards across the board. In 2009, 2010, the initial RPS was codified into a much stronger law 40% clean energy generated for power generation purposes, and then trying to reduce the amount of energy by 30% or 4,300% gigawatt hours by 2030 in power generation by efficiency measures. So the renewable portfolio standard, the energy efficiency portfolio standard, became a cornerstone of what's known as the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative. And then there were voluntary goals that were set forth in transportation. Roughly 2/3 of Hawaii's energy portfolio is related to ground transportation and aviation, roughly equally. So that's another area that this Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative set forth goals. Now, the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative is also a group of like-minded individuals who are trying to support the implementation of these goals and the whole set of regulations and policies to support those goals. So that's ongoing. And when I became the administrator almost a year ago, the initial phase of this, which was much more narrowly focused and was really targeted towards a few projects and a cable, we determined that it must be broader. Listen to the comments, and so our role continues in helping drive that agenda and to ensure that we have a much broader view that really relates to this statewide program of achieving renewable energy, energy efficiency, and hopefully we have a lot of work to do getting a handle on building some more realistic, stronger transportation goals.
Thank you, Mark. Let's talk for a minute about the environmental review process that we're involved in here. This is a federal document, and it's a federal environmental review process. The governing statute is the National Environmental Policy Act, which was passed about 40 years ago. The original purpose of this statute was to ensure that federal decision-making is informed by environmental review. And this process requires public involvement. It's very important to us. This process also involves cooperating agency involvement. Cooperating agency is one that has either a permitting jurisdictional responsibility or special expertise in some impact area or technology area that we're going to be looking at. For this Hawaii Clean Energy, PEIS, the state of Hawaii is a cooperating agency. Obviously, they have a huge special expertise regarding issues in the state. BOEM is a cooperating agency. The Environmental Protection Agency has agreed to be a cooperating agency. And we've invited several others, and we're hoping that several more will sign up. I don't have formal responses from a number of them yet, but we believe we will get several other agencies for formal cooperating agency involvement. Now, the particular review we're doing, an environmental impact statement, has a series of defined steps. It starts with a notice of intent, similar to, well, exactly like what we published on August 10th, the notice of intent for this process. That initiates the public scoping period. We do internal scoping. We define what we think. We have a purpose and need. We define what we think our proposed action is, what we think we're going to evaluate in terms of resource areas and impact areas. But we want to hear what the public thinks. Are we evaluating the right thing? Are we looking at the right proposed action and alternatives? Have we missed an impact area that is of importance to this community that we didn't realize? The scope of the document can change based on the public input. In fact, this process has demonstrated how much that scope changes, because this process is a continuation of the process that began about a year and a half ago. It was called PEIS. It was the Hawaii Renewable Energy Program WIN, I think was the acronym. That focused on wind remain a part of this process. We're very clear that we were not looking broadly enough. We needed to look at more than wind, and we needed to look at the whole state. And so we've spent a number of months rescoping, replanning this process, and we're back now with a proposal that we believe much better represents what we heard from the communities the first time around to look across the board. So what you give in input can very dramatically impact this process. We're in scoping right now. This period will go on till, October 9th. Then the department will go back and we will actually do the analyses and develop a draft programmatic environmental impact statement. We're expecting sometime about mid to late 2013 to have that document completed. We will publish that and we'll publish a notice of availability. And then we will come back and repeat this public involvement process. We will come back to Hawaii and we'll do another series of public meetings, and we will have a similar series of methods for you to make comments. And we will be asking for your input on how well we did those analyses, on what that draft document says. Did we cover everything you wanted us to cover? Are there things you disagree with? Are there inaccuracies? Did we get things wrong? So that is the second area for public involvement. We take those comments will actually be responded to, every one of them, in a comment response document that will become part of the final programmatic PEIS when it is published. That final also will be revised as appropriate as according to those comments. Once that final is published, and again, we will publish a notice of availability so everyone who has been involved in this process knows it's available, and get a hold of it, use it. No sooner than 30 days after that distribution, the Department of Energy can publish a record of decision, letting everybody know if we're moving forward with our proposed action or not. So those are the formal steps in the process. Those are defined by the regulations. The regulations also define this creature called a programmatic environmental impact statement. It's not as common as a project-specific environmental impact statement. It's something that federal agencies do, and we do this fairly frequently, to look at the environmental impacts of a very broad agency action. Look at developing a policy. It's a planning, it can be a planning or feasibility document. Okay? And in this particular Hawaii Clean Energy Programmatic PEIS, we are doing a planning study. This is for possible use in programs in the future. We are not looking at any specific project. We are not looking at any specific site. We are looking at theoretically the broad menu of activities and technologies that could be used in this state, and we are looking at all 6 of the major islands to get a feeling for what potential impacts are, what type of mitigation measures and best practices could be used to lessen those impacts or to make them more acceptable, and what is the community input on this broad menu of options that we're looking at. This PEIS in no way will eliminate the need for environmental review for specific projects when they are proposed. If a project is proposed that has a federal nexus, the federal government will be responsible for review under the National Environmental Policy Act. And of course, all projects in the state of Hawaii are subject to the Hawaiian environmental laws and rules. Okay, how did we get here? I gave a little bit of the background here. The process started with the high-rep wind phase. That notice of intent was December 2010. Those scoping meetings were in February. As I said, we got many, many comments. They told us to broaden of what we were looking at, the technologies, and the area. We also got comments that our proposed action is the DOE would develop guidance that will allow us to incorporate this knowledge and understanding about potential environmental impacts, always including cultural and historical impacts as an environmental impact. To use as we make decisions going forward, potential funding decisions, potential developing of programs, other activities that the Department of Energy could engage in to support the state of Hawaii in achieving their goals. The scope broadened this range of renewable energy and energy efficiency activities. We're looking at a new area, all 6 of the islands. We published a new notice of intent that is programmatic review. And I will emphasize again, we are not looking at any specific projects. We are not recommending any specific approach here. We're trying to take a neutral and non-advocacy look to evaluate the options to help the Department of Energy and the state of Hawaii and the community in making up their mind and their decisions about how they want to approach these issues. Some of the resource areas and potential impacts that we listed more than this in the notice of intent, but these are some of the ones that we certainly heard about the first time around: cultural and historical resources, threatened and endangered species in regards to the Endangered Species Act, water resources, socioeconomics, how will some of these activities affect the communities, are there going to be jobs, that type of thing. Air quality, visual resources, land use. We are asking you to tell us which of these are important, what have we missed, what might you have less concern about. We want, again, your input on what resource areas and potential areas of impact we need to look at. We've defined 5 clean energy categories: energy efficiency, conservation methods, distributed renewables, utility scale renewables, alternative transportation fuels, and electrical transmission and distribution. I'm not quite
Jane.
sure how to avoid the...
Jane, turn this way a little bit more to keep, there you go.
Okay. Under energy efficiency, this is how you use less energy to accomplish the same things you're trying to accomplish, of course. And I think we all have experience in turning the heat down and the lights off and that type of thing. But as a department, we have a history of supporting such things as building codes and requirements for new construction to be more energy efficient or to retrofit existing buildings. Obviously, energy conservation programs. We can define initiatives and programs that have incentives or rebates. I'm sorry. I know it's got to be annoying to listen to the reverberation. Ground source heat pumps, seawater cooling, and solar heating. These are all things that can be used to add to energy efficiency.
Oh, I'm still on.
Into Mac? Okay. Distributed renewables. These are using small-scale energy generating technologies that are providing energy for a point source, like a residence or a business or a farm. And again, we've got several different kinds. You can use small systems of biomass, hydroelectric, hydrogen fuel cells, solar photovoltaic systems. That's one I'm sure everybody's familiar with. We see lots of residences with PV panels on them, and small wind systems. The utility scale, this is when energy is developed to feed into the grid. And I need to apologize, we had a typographical formatting error in our notice of intent, and it put 2 of our technologies on the same line. We listed biomass and geothermal together. We are not looking at anything known as biomass geothermal. We are looking at biomass, and we are looking at geothermal, and we are looking modes. These are our technologies and ways to minimize the dependence on imported petroleum for transportation in the state. And again, we've got a number of options that we're planning on looking at: biofuels, hybrid electrical vehicles, liquefied natural gas, electric vehicles, hydrogen, and mass transportation. Electrical transmission and distribution, both within the islands and potentially connecting the islands. We need to have a way that the grid can take the renewable energy that's being created and can use it most effectively and most efficiently to address the issues and needs of the state. And that then also includes, if there were to be an undersea cable and the transition cells that would need, smart grid technology that allows the energy to be sent where it is needed immediately when it is needed, and energy storage technologies. And again, in every one of those areas, we are soliciting your input as to which ones of those you find like a greater emphasis on or a lesser emphasis on, what impacts from some of those you're concerned about, are there things we have missed? We want to hear what you have to say about these topics that we're planning on looking at. Our analytical approach to look at these environmental impacts, including cultural and social, is on all 6 of the islands. First of all, we're going to describe these potential activities and technologies. It's clearly not everyone is familiar equally with all of these. So we all have a general and basic understanding of all of these. We're also going to describe the potential affected environment on an island-by-island basis. Remember, we do not have any specific sites or projects. So what we're going to try to do is give an overall understanding of each of the islands and what each island's individual environment that could be differently impacted. Are there special habitats for endangered species on one island? Does another island have a different water resource problem or a different type of soil that could be affected and impacted differently? And then we're going to look at these potential impacts. And then we want to identify what potential mitigation measures or best practices could be employed if one of these technologies is chosen to be implemented to lessen those impacts or to make it more acceptable to the community. And on every one of those, we will be looking for input from the community. Proposed action is to develop guidance for the Department of Energy to use. This guidance could be used to ensure that the DOE decision makers think about these things up front when we create a grant program or when someone applies to us to get a loan to put a project in, so that our DOE decision makers actually think about, well, have they done their homework on what these environmental impacts are? Have they done their homework on what the cultural issues they might run into are and how they will deal with them before a decision is made to move forward on that project? However, while this is what DOE's proposed action is, we also will be producing a large document with a great deal of information and that will reference a lot more detailed information that we would hope will also be of use to the community and to the state and to other agencies in similar decision-making situations. So what we've asked you here for tonight is to get involved, to give us comments on all of these different aspects of the scope of the PEIS that I've talked about, additional technologies or activities that you would like us to look at. Do you have special information or particular information about the potential environmental, cultural, or socioeconomic impacts that one of these technologies could create on your island or in your community that we might not have access to this information? information, that this information could be of value to us in our analysis. And what type of guidelines would you see, perhaps, as being useful? Would you see that you would prefer the Department of Energy to think about when we're making these decisions? What are the issues that are important to you that you want our decision makers in Washington, D.C. to know about? How do you comment? Well, here we are in the scoping period, and the scoping period runs until the 9th of October. It's a 60-day scoping period. However, as always, the Department of Energy will, to the extent practicable, take late penalties. We always try to do that. There's an email address. You can go to our website, our PEIS website at hawaiicleanenergypeis.com, and there's a link there where you can make a comment. You can send a fax, you can send a letter, or you can make your comment here tonight. And we have a couple of ways. We have made an arrangement that people can speak one-on-one to the court reporter if they are more comfortable doing that. The most important part of this session will be after the public the question and answer session, when people will have a chance to come up here and make their comment to the whole group, share it with all of us, and the court reporter will be recording it so that it is part of the record. We also have comment forms here tonight. If you would prefer to write your comment down and give it to us, we would be very happy to accept it that way. We want your input. We will do, as I said earlier, the same process on the draft document when it comes out. We will have the public meetings, and we will have all of these ways to comment on that draft document as well. Hello, and next we will have questions and answers. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Jean. I think at this point in time, we're going to do a little bit of rearranging. We're going to move into the questions and answers. The panel will stay up at the table. And if you can remember that the questions will be different from your comments. The questions are really about Jane's presentation, the PEIS process, or any questions you had with respect to anything that you heard up to date, including anything you may have from our clip. The comments are really going to be about what would you like to see in the draft PEIS, which will be right after the questions and answers. So if you think it may be more appropriate that it's a comment, please hold it. If you want to just ask the question, please come up. And in order to make this flow easier, I'm going to ask you to come up, if you don't mind, so that you can state your comments so that it can be heard not only by the panel, but by everybody in the audience. Because someone may ask the same question that you may be thinking about. And if you feel it appropriate that someone's asked the question and it's been addressed, it's okay for you to sit down. But if not, please come up and ask the questions. And remember, our time is we're moving along really well. But the real important part of this meeting is going to be for the public scoping, to actually get your comments on the record. So I want to make sure we have enough time to do that as well. We did want to acknowledge that we have Representative Gail Revere here. So we appreciate that he's taken the time to actually be here and participate in our public scoping meeting. So with that, we're going to ask you to come up. We'll have you're free to use this mic. And if you don't mind, if you can come up here, if you've got a question, that it can be presented both to the panel as well as to the audience. Don't be shy. Does anybody have a question? You can form.
Somebody had to get this started. Two questions. I think one is quick and the other one might require a little bit more. But the first question is, what is the cost or the budget for the for this project, PEIS? And the second question would be, if you do not study specific technologies, what value is there in this environmental study? In other words, how can we compare wind versus solar versus ocean if we're not actually studying the individual technologies? So it's just, if you could clarify that for us, please. Thank you.
Turn it on.
Is the,
Push down.
okay, I'm technologically incompetent, so if I mess this up, I apologize. I'm going to take the second one first. We are actually going to look at all of these specific technologies. What we're not doing is advocating any single one as the correct solution, but we will look at every one of these technologies in terms of each of the resource areas and in terms of each of the islands in order, we hope, to provide exactly that, a comparative suite of information that people can use in formulating their own opinions about what types of energy technologies and activities they would be most comfortable with in dealing with their community's issues and problems. Because obviously every community has energy challenges that we all have to meet, and we all are going to have to, within our own communities, make these decisions. So what we're trying to do is give all of us an equal knowledge base that takes environmental and cultural and socioeconomic impacts on communities into account up front, as well as the more customary developmental type of issues that we look at.
I'll answer that.
Okay.
Yeah, as far as the budget for this program, for the Programmatic EIS, this project was begun under American Recovery and Reinvestment Act funds, nearly $3 million, $2.99 million. And making it statewide, because all of that work it's already been conducted, it'll be fed into this the current process. There's an additional $2 million estimated to finish it. It's roughly 2/3 of that will come from the Energy Development Special Fund, a small amount from the Energy Security Special Fund, and the remainder from the Department of Energy.
Thank you. We're trying to use, to the greatest extent possible, work that has already been done, work that was done in the previous process, work that has been done by NREL and other national labs, work that has been done by the University of Hawaii. We're not going to reinvent the wheel here. We're trying, to the greatest extent possible, to build on a tremendous base of knowledge out there and pull it together and present it in such a way that it is usable.
Two quick questions, hopefully. One, the Energy Development Security Fund. You mean military?
No, the Energy Development Special Fund is the one that's utilized or dedicated to the Hawaii National Energy Institute.
And second, normally at the start of any document, you have a set of definitions. I noticed under state law, the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative, and the Programmatic Environmental Impact Statement. All of them say clean energy, none of them define it.
Could you please give that comment on the record, and we'll be sure to define the term in our documents. When I say we're looking also for comments on inaccuracies, that's, yes, we need to know these things. Anybody else would like to make a comment?
This gentleman.
Understand that about 7 years ago, the Federal Energy Act passed, which The only state being that is Hawaii, and it requires that there be a study of the use of fossil fuels. What I'd like to find out is where can I find out how much money the government, federal or state, has expended on public relations between then and the present time to boost big wind. Also, how many funds have been jointly provided by your corporate co-workers to fund PR efforts, and will these continue?
There have been lots of questions that have been levied through open records requests about public relations and about money spent on big wind. This isn't about big wind, this particular programmatic, but if anybody wants to find out what money has been spent from different agencies, I can tell you I'm very happy to take any of those requests and answer them. I certainly have nothing to hide. Pardon me?
And I would just say in terms of the federal NEPA process, the outreach that we do, I'm sorry, in terms of the federal NEPA process, the kind of outreach that we do is to do things like promote these meetings, the advertisements some of you might have seen asking you to come here tonight. We do a press release saying that we're going to be doing a series of meetings, this type of thing. Where this process is not to promote anything other than the review process itself, to ensure that we follow this process correctly and that everybody has their chance to be involved, and that is the purpose, my purpose and my team's purpose, and what we're trying to accomplish here.
I just got back from Maui, and on Maui I have a wind farm, and like 75% of the windmills were idle. And my understanding is the reason they're idle is because they have no storage. So MECO won't take the energy unless they really need it. And of course, we also just recently had the fire in Oahu that took the batteries for the Oahu wind farm offline, and thus the whole facility offline. These go to the capacity factor, which you're actually going to get in the real world from the wind farm. And I want to know if you guys have a plan for adjusting your assumed capacity factors for our real world experience here at Hawaii, and how the cost benefit both to consumers and the environment will be impacted by a lower than expected capacity factor.
I'm going to let my technical people answer the technical part, but let me just say that in terms of this PEIS, that type of problem and challenge is one of the things that we are looking at under the electrical transmission and distribution energy category. But again, our role is in the PEIS is not to propose the solution, but rather to help analyze and publicize what the potential impacts are in the various options for the solution. And then on the technical side.
But I believe that it's an important point. This is a pretty unusual, and I know that it's going to be hard, I think, for a lot of people to adapt to the format. This isn't something where the State Energy Office, unless you want to know our position on something, but that this isn't really designed for us to lay out the solution. This is for you to lay out what are your preferred paths, guidelines, what are the best practices that should be employed in siting or establishing renewable energy facilities, transportation measures, infrastructure relating to this large-scale goals of meeting clean energy. And when we talk about clean energy, we're talking about specifically if you identify, there's statute that identifies what is
renewable energy that meets the renewable portfolio standards. There's energy efficiency measures that are identified under the energy efficiency portfolio standard, and there's a whole list of alternative transportation technologies. So what we're looking for is your ideas on how is that appropriately done that takes into consideration the environmental and cultural impacts of that.
Well, I heard you mention the environmental impacts, but I never heard anything specific about the impacts on individual humans and other animal species, especially human health. I'd like to make sure that's underlined several times, human health. Especially regarding, like, we're electrical chemical beings and we still don't understand much about the electrical nature of our beings. And I'm concerned about the smart meters. I've heard some extremely negative impacts that they're having on individuals' health. And so I would just, I want to make sure human health is underlined in your work. And also, we have a lot of renters in this community, much higher than on the mainland. And so I think it's really important that we understand how a renter is specifically involved and what the opt-out would be for a smart meter. And what happens when one renter moves out who has an opt-out and the new renter moves in who would like to opt out, and what are the economic impacts of that? So, please keep those in mind, economic, from having so many renters in this community. And also on the human health, if we are being close to windmill, and I would also like to understand about the distribution from other places that I've been. A lot of the energy gets lost through the distribution network. How much of this analysis is going to break that down? For instance, we do a cable into the ocean. How much of that energy is going to get lost?
Let me first, if I may, use as an example, those are excellent scoping comments. Please make them either after the break with the court reporter or in writing or email so that they're on the record. Because this part of the meeting, questions and answers, are not on the record. They're not on the record. It won't be until we move into the formal scoping part on the record, and those are excellent examples of good scoping comments, the type of input that we want. So please, I do not want to lose that. And if you don't wish to stand up in front of people again, if you could just write it down or do it by email. So but please, those are excellent comments to make. And yes, human health and safety is an area of impacts that we will be looking at. Absolutely.
This part of the program is really intended to allow you to ask questions. So this part isn't being recorded, but it does give, this was an absent piece from, as I understand it, from previous scoping meetings. So that's the purpose of this. But if you want to get your specific recommendation or concern on the record, that will happen after this.
Yes, and I'll say that the last time around, on the first set of scoping comments, people said, we are frustrated, we want to ask questions, you are not responding. That was why we made this decision to do this. It may show quite a bit that this is not something that we typically do in these meetings. Typically, we focus just on listening to what you have to say as far as your comments go. But to try to be responsive to those concerns and make this as useful as possible to the communities who are commenting, we wanted to do this, but we also want to be flexible and make it meet the needs of the community here. So I would say another area that I'd like to hear comments on is how well this meeting format, which is different from the way we normally do it, is working, because we're going to come back for more meetings on the draft. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do want to make real clear, what will be different is this question and answers, there will be an opportunity for for the panel to actually answer your questions. When we move into the formal scoping process, it won't be interactive. You will be given an opportunity to put your comment on the record, but it's not as if they will be able to answer. So this really is the opportunity, if you've got a question, to come up and ask them.
My question is, the Department of Energy funds these utility or industrial scale projects through Department of Energy guaranteed loans. In Hawaii, or any place for that matter, why can't the Department of Energy also provide funds to small scale renewable energy, individual homeowners, small businesses? Why can't you provide the funds, or even provide the funds to the utilities so that they can integrate? Will this not help the initiative?
Yeah, I'll start with what the state of Hawaii is doing. Thank you. And it'd be helpful also if when you ask your question, you could identify yourself and if you're affiliated with any organization. Using, again, these ARA, or the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act funds, we created a loan loss reserve. The State Energy Office created a loan loss reserve program. I know I saw Carolyn Shawn here earlier. Her program actually administers that. And Carolyn, thank you. And it's called Green Sun Hawaii. So the website is greensunhawaii.org, or is it .com, Carolyn? greensunhawaii.org. Or if you go to energy.hawaii.gov, you can find the Green Sun Hawaii program, and that provides low interest or targeted loans for all various size projects. We're also looking very seriously at the Energy Office at providing a pool of funds as a legislative measure for the upcoming session. So please keep your eye on it. We're trying to finalize plans for that, but it would be extremely low interest, and it would be across the board for virtually any size of renewable energy or energy efficiency program. So keep your eye open for that. That's something that Richard Lim and I are very excited about.
Just to sort of build on what Mark described, the U.S. Department of Energy, when it comes to providing loans or financing support to individual homeowners, typically works through, like here in Hawaii, state energy offices. Typically they provide money to the state agency, which can then administer the program, and usually in a more efficient and targeted and effective way than the federal government could, to create a national type program. So we do end up providing financial assistance to everything from individuals to small businesses to large companies through different types of programs. And the loan guarantee program that you're describing, I believe, refers to the larger DOE loan guarantee program that provides typically larger scale projects, loan guarantee funding or backing. It's not actually even loan money. The loan actually comes from a commercial entity, but we partially guarantee the loan after careful scrutiny. Other examples of the federal government providing incentives and financial support to individual homeowners are programs like the Energy Star program, which often provides a rebate for buying a more efficient appliance, those types of things. Or the U.S. Department of Energy provides loans, loan guarantees, and financial assistance for energy projects to those in rural areas, and not just farmers, but individuals in rural areas. So just to provide some further background, there's many different ways that the federal government tries to assist in clean energy development.
Warrington Colony Global Cooperative. It's hard to, unfortunately I missed the February meeting. I really don't know who you folks are. If you can just shortly introduce yourself and give me one position that you have regarding a socio-economic, cultural impact on the indigenous population in the state of Hawaii and our possible chances of developing utility-sized wind projects on, are not recognized by the federal government yet, but on a Native Hawaiian level, to recreate the best practices village concept that my ancestors once practiced to keep the economic resources and revenue generated here in the islands. You would get a lot more community support if Molokain's own property, own business. Please be comments and if you can identify yourselves the last two. I know U.S. Department of Energy, State of Hawaii Energy, Jane, thank you for being here. Welcome to the islands. And I'm trying to read the name, but I can't see to it.
Mark.
Mark Eckenrode is our representative for the United States Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, which is also a cooperating agency. That was a pretty complex question. I believe, let me, for my sake of clarity, I believe you were asking as an example of what we would see as a potential cultural impact. Is that? Okay, a potential, let me take this in two steps. A potential cultural impact would be in the construction of a technology facility if that interfered with a burial ground or a traditional hunting ground or something of that sort. That is very clearly a potential cultural impact that would have to be dealt with. Potential mitigation or best practices could be, and here I have to say, I do not have the experience in the Hawaiian Islands. I'm building on the experience that I have working with American Indian tribes on the mainland, but I think that it's probably somewhat analogous at a conceptual level. One possibility is to have a trained observer who represents the culture present during construction to ensure that if there is any impact to cultural relics, things are stopped and things are appropriately dealt with. Another potential best practice or mitigation would be to develop the process by which you agree to deal with if a site is found, for instance, or a burial is found. So those are examples in the cultural realm. In socioeconomics, we look at things like what kind of jobs might be produced in the local community from constructing this facility or from operating this facility or for, I don't know, for distributed. Are these, the actual hardware, is this something that could be produced in the state so that the economic benefit of are in, say, giving a grant program for people to install some certain type of technology in their homes that increases energy efficiency, is this going to contribute to the economic base of the state and keep that economic benefit in state? Are those responsive to the, these are examples of what we will be looking at on these different activities and technologies. Are those responsive to your question?
I would think that's the paper version of it, but I was going to ask from your insights or what is your personal position on the socioeconomic impacts on the Native Hawaiian population. Is it beneficial to us to be utility scale wind farm in a cooperative manner, in an appropriate manner? Where are you folks on that level in your heart and also on paper, but really from where you guys are now?
As a person, Jane Summerson, I cannot speak for the Native Hawaiian community, and I wouldn't want to try. You have an experiential base that I do not share, but I hope I can be empathetic about it, and I certainly want to ensure that what your concerns are heard and are taken seriously and are dealt with. That's very important to me as a person. That's one of the reasons I do the job I'm doing.
Thank you, Jane. Yeah, I mean, it's an important question. I think you're trying to probe into where we're coming from the state. And as far as this process goes, I can only speak as an individual, and I think you're probably more interested in knowing what we feel individually. I spent 7 years at Oahu and set up the Malama loan program, for example. But from that experience, it became clear that if it's possible for the Hawaiian community and actually local communities, I think that the model that has been developed by KIUC is really a good model. It's been working well. So if there is the possibility of the community come together and create something that could be more of a cooperative model, that could own assets, could invest in infrastructure, and be somewhat self-sustaining. Molokai, with its population, and with its indigenous resources, could be certainly self-sufficient on that, in that manner. So that seems to be a very positive thing to work towards. I think a lot of people would support that. Likewise, our broader state plan is to look at all of the renewable sources, and we've said this and we believe it. If a community does not want to develop a large utility scale initiative in their community, determined overwhelming that this is not the thing to do, we don't want to see it happen. But likewise, if you do, and you do want to sort of participate, you see it as an opportunity for economic growth, either through a cooperative model or through a power purchase agreement model, that's a really positive thing. Because we've seen, in analyzing the demand for energy and also the sources of demand, we see it as an opportunity for a localized or indigenous resource growth. If that's something that fits in with a community planning process, that's a great thing. If it doesn't, we don't want to see it happen. Simple as that. And this process is all about getting your input on what's the appropriate things that need to be considered. And if that can be done in a constructive way, I think we can actually arrive at a solution that will make us a lot more energy independent and will give us a much more stronger, stable environment. Will reduce electricity rates over time. I really believe it's a positive thing. So that's the state's position on this.
I think you wanted to hear from...
Any other comments?
He'd asked on a personal level for the response. Mark, you're going to have to bend this way. The cord's short.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. It's intrinsic to all of us. What we're responding.
You're cut off.
Yeah.
Let me give you this one instead.
Yes.
This one is longer.
Press the poll.
Okay, thank you again. It's, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, we deal in all areas of the ocean, especially for renewables, for wave energy and wind energy. By training, I'm a scientist, and I have many choices, but I chose to go into public service. And public service involves all of us. And I value the spirit that we're all connected. And we're all in this together to make a better planet and to make a better world. That's why we're into the renewables, because we know we can't go down that same path that we've been going down before. So I value the link that we all have together. And I value the spirit of you and the indigenous peoples all over. No better, no worse. Because we're all in this together and we're all trying to make a better planet for all of us, and for our children and our children's children.
I would just say my colleagues said it very well, and I agree with their value system. We're here to make this an opportunity for everyone, and certainly not to create something that individual communities don't want to see or think is not a positive opportunity for that community. Thanks.
We actually have several more questions. We'll keep them brief.
What is your opinion? What is the most energy efficient solution to Honolulu's mass transit problem? As you may know, the federal government may provide $1.55 billion for elevated heavy rail 20 miles, or you can use the bus rapid transit, something like that. What is the most energy efficient solution for our transportation, mass transportation?
Wow. I would. Is that on? This is the first project I have been involved in for the state of Hawaii. I would not be so presumptuous as to try to give a concrete answer to that question, but in a process and general sense, it would be a solution which is economically within the grasp of the community, which addresses the problems of the community and which is acceptable to the community, because otherwise I don't see how it could be successful, whatever it is. So if you're asking me personally, I don't have the technical knowledge to answer. That's what I would see as the
So congestion mitigation typically for transportation measures is the most efficient measure. Fortunately, in this case, the city and county and the Oahu Metropolitan Planning Organization have the responsibility for coming up with a strategy for light rail and transportation control measures, and not the state energy office. So I'm going to punt on that question.
And from the U.S. Department of Energy's perspective, it also is not our purview to study that technical question, and we haven't, so I wouldn't offer an opinion. Thank you.
We'll try to be more courageous with other questions.
I've got three other people. Mr. Benzicourt, and then you'll be third.
Aloha. My name is George Mita. I'm from Hawaii Ethanol. My question is, I look at your boards here, I don't see much emphasis put on ethanol. I have done over 16 years of testing with ethanol and tested with primitive little generators, timed it against petroleum. Running on ethanol, it goes 4 times longer. So my question is, why are windmills that make Hawaii ugly? I've been here all my life, and I hate like heck to see the windmills. Anything but windmills. Anything that will not make Hawaii ugly. Anything that will not make Hawaii ugly is fine. And the way I see it, my study is ethanol is clean energy, but nothing is mentioned on the board. study of ethanol. Ethanol can be used in cars, generators, several things, including vodka. But my own thing is, please, folks, preserve Hawaii. This is the best place in the planet. And all I can say is, I'm against the windmills. Thank you.
Don, I'd like to just give a little feedback. So, again, just to help create some background and context for this programmatic environmental impact assessment, we're not here to try to run a competition of one technology versus the other, and this process won't do that. So it won't pick winners and losers, so to speak. It's going to analyze the range of environmental impacts from all of these different alternative options. And under the broader category of the alternative transportation fuels, certainly ethanol is one of those advanced biofuels that is it's mandated in the state, and it is an opportunity. And the federal government, and particularly my organization that I come from, the U.S. Department of Energy, has spent over $1 billion just in the last, since the Recovery Act, in this administration, over $1 billion in research in advanced biofuels, including ethanol. And it is one of the most highly invested in technical areas of all. So it is a technical solution of great interest to the U.S. Department of Energy, even if it's not represented broadly, prominently in one of the posters here.
And if you go to Hawaii.energy.gov, you'll see we have a top 40 list, and various biofuel projects are listed prominently there. We track, actually, there are close to 100 projects that are reported to us, and I want to say something like 14 or 15 of them are biofuels of various kinds. And of course, we have supported in the past ethanol with particularly blending legislation and the 10% mandate.
Aloha everyone. My name is Luhala Leonardi and I'm from the Waianae area. Over the years, I have experienced geothermal and opposition to geothermal. There was a lot of violence before in the 80s of geothermal. And opposition, there's a lot of protesting. The thing about geothermal that I wanted to present to be sure that it's on record is the fact that steam is water and water is steam. And I grew up on Hawaiian homestead. I'm now a Hawaiian homesteader. So the native Hawaiian issue is a big issue with me. As far as the loans for Native Hawaiians and the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, specifically Malama loan, it is really an entrapment for those of us who are Native Hawaiians. It's a loan that's gone bad. There's nothing wonderful about Malama loans. So I just want to make that clear, Mark. I don't know if you had anything to do with those Malama loans, but I just wanted to let you know the experience that we are having are possibly foreclosure to our homes. And it's just the way it's set up. And a lot of people that I know of are either in foreclosure, being evicted, or in courts for many, many years over these Native Hawaiian loans. And the response that I get for solutions that I get from the Office of Hawaiian Affairs or anyone that I do call, a lot of times I advocate for a lot of seniors, is the fact that it's a federal loan and OHA has to abide by federal guidelines. The other thing too is the next utility that I was involved in, which turned bad and very violent, was our wastewater management. A lot of our components were forced to sign on contracts. To hook up to the sewer. It's really sad because now they're paying sewer fees as well as water fees, and this has brought them to foreclosure on Hawaiian Homestead. Now, when I seek out for legal advice, there's none. There's just none. I just see components getting evicted every day in my Hawaiian Homestead, refinancing and forced foreclosures on their homes. There is no solutions. There is no place for us to couch our solution on problem solving. It's just ugly out there. Let's see, I think I've gone down the things. I also want to let you know that in 1991, around 91 and 90, I was a student at Cal Poly Pomona. One of the things that we need to do research was to go out to the fields, and one of the fields that I wanted to go to because I was interested in the gambling. So on reservations. So I did. I had a person take me out to a reservation where there was a gambling house. On my way to this place, I noticed I'd never seen this. I didn't know what it was. I went out to Palm Springs, and there is fields in the desert full of windmills, thousands of them, thousands. Nearby is Palm Springs, and nearby is reservations, the Native American reservations. Now, I was supposed to be doing my report on gambling, and I couldn't get my eyes off this fields and fields of windmills. And again, this is back in 1991. Each windmill, sit down. On each windmill, there is a tax write-up. A person sponsors this windmill, and his name gets on this windmill, and it's a tax write-up. Now, I have pictures of these windmills, thousands and thousands of windmills out there in the desert on a continent. And this is islands. This is like itty-bitty islands in the middle of the Pacific. Okay? I'm appalled that when I see a windmill, I mean, we just got through with HPLC or something like that. And every acre is important. And it seems to me that this is where our public lands are going to go. And the other part too is, I was part of Save the Surf out in Waianae with Giacomo. People, listen. I mean, I'm listening tonight, and I'm wondering how much energy, human energy, is going to take to make this panel understand what is actually coming up for our younger generation that are not in education yet. They're not educated on this. So who's going to be hired? Who's going to be the laborer? It is not going to be our children because they're not on board yet. Thank you.
Thank you. You asked really good comments. I hope you bring those up during the comment period because those are really good. Okay. Thank you. Very good. Great comment. Mr. Benton.
The question relates to the phrase develop guidance, because obviously you have lots of people in the audience who think that dividing up the EIS between the programmatic one and the final one is just a way to cut and divide and conquer. So what will the actual legal effect of programmatic EIS be on the final one? Will it, if it covers the same area, will it be conclusive? Or will people be able to challenge it? Because here's I see the problem. People in certain communities, such as Lanai, may be interested in an EIS that goes to their island, but they won't come to court to challenge one that covers the whole state. If that programmatic EIS is going to forego, then being able to challenge certain parts or certain findings that are made in the PEIS as opposed to the final one. And we need to know that. Who develops the guidance? Is it the state? And is it by law or by regulation, or is it just by governor or commission? How is this going to be determined, and when is it going to be determined, so we know the exact effect and preclusive value of the PEIS?
This programmatic environmental impact statement is a Department of Energy process. And the proposal is for the Department of Energy to develop guidance that we, the department, would use in our decision-making processes. All projects that are proposed will have to go through project-specific environmental review under the state law, and if there's a federal nexus, under the federal law as well. Nothing that we do in the programmatic will preclude any type of environmental review at a project-specific level. So
why did you use the phrase develop guidance to allow us to incorporate the PEIS in the individual PEIS?
To incorporate
Findings.
yes, to incorporate
Record of decision. Will that preclude challenges to the facts and then record of decision?
well, the record of decision in this case would be, for example, the Department of Energy has decided that it will go forward and develop guidance based on the analytical work that we have done in this process that the department would then use when we develop, say, a program. And I'm pulling this out of my hat. We have no plans for specific programs at this point in time. But if, for example, a program were going to be developed for energy efficiency retrofits that would be of use to the state of Hawaii, this would allow the Department of Energy to use this information when, for instance, writing an RFP, build the environmental work in up front, rather than say, give us a good business plan, then we'll decide, then let's go see what the environmental impacts are and whether we can deal with them or not. But any individual project would still have to go through its environmental review, would still have all of the opportunities for challenge, for input by the communities, and for challenge. This is a planning, a feasibility document.
Nobody believes that.
Pardon?
Nobody believes that. At this stage, we saw the planning go into our super ferry, we saw it go into our trains. So it will have no preclusive effect of any factual finding. Any finding of no significant impact will have no preclusive finding on the individual.
A finding of no significant impact is something that you do under NEPA on an environmental assessment if you've decided you don't need to do an environmental impact statement. By
statement defines and describes the impacts. I'm asking, will the PEIS preclude any people from Lanai or anywhere else from challenging the findings that the PEIS might have that were not incorporated into a specific EIS for Lanai?
It's a separate analysis.
It's a separate analysis.
The simple answer is no. This document does not have legal authority to preclude any legal action. It neither by law enables nor precludes any individual project. It will not do that by design.
And the findings in it will also be that way. No finding can be picked out of there.
It's an informative
That's all NEPA is.
It does not replace Chapter 343. So the individual project environmental reviews will occur under state law.
It would be a full review. Not restricted by the content.
Not restricted by the context of the programmatic EIS. Hopefully, the intent is that the programmatic and with all of the public input will actually provide guidance so that people developing an individual EIS will know things to avoid, things to include, but it certainly will not opt them out of doing anything that's required under our environmental review law. And if you know anything about my background, I'm a very strong supporter of our environmental review law. So the whole point is not to circumvent anything. It's basically to provide guidance on what's the most appropriate way to develop these projects. This is a much more expansive planning tool than what was originally contemplated. And we're broadening it by choice because it's the appropriate thing to do. It's the right thing to do.
Anybody else have any other questions? I have a gentleman here. If you've got a question, please come on. If not, we'll begin this one right after.
Hello, my name is Micah. I'm a student at UH. And as somebody new to the process, I think it's really interesting to see programmatic EISs. I think they're relatively rare. And I think it's really nice to see a more general and comprehensive look at any subject area. So I hope that supports guiding kind of the decision-making process that goes on in the future. I'd be really interested to hear more about the process and how this will all unfold. Is it going to be like a contractor that implements and how the public input will be incorporated? I understand that there's scoping now and scoping when we move to the final document. But are there mechanisms where you will be kind of extracting the information island per island, or is this a process right now that will go away, the study will continue, people will do it, put it together, and then another public comment period will ensue in the future. So just a little bit about the process. I think the history was really well laid out, and it seems like there's a lot of potential for a lot of things to happen. Thank you.
About the process, we'll take the comments from the scoping. We consider all of them and use them to make changes if need be to the scope that we've got planned. We will produce a scoping comment summary document. The comments, the transcripts from the meeting, and our summary document will be posted on the website so that people can see what comments were made and what our takeaways were. Meanwhile, we will start, and I do have a contractor who will be supporting this effort, and they have the specialists in the different analytical areas. We will not be going out and, for instance, surveying islands and gathering individual data because this is a planning and more of a feasibility study. We will be using studies and materials that have already been developed. As I said, we are reaching out to the University of Hawaii and to the National Renewable Energy Lab and to our fellow cooperating agencies and other federal agencies, and we met with some of the state agencies, Hawaiian Homelands, the parks, that type of thing, and we're reaching out to all of them for information that we will use to do the analytical work and develop the draft document. When that draft document is published, we will go through an analogous comment period like this specifically on the draft. We'll come back out and do a series of public meetings. Sometime after, give you some time after the draft is published, obviously, to review it and to understand it. We'll come out and give the meetings and give something of a presentation of what is in the draft.
and we'll ask for comments on it. And typically, at that point, comments would be in section 8.2.3, we don't feel you've actually fully discussed the potential impacts of technology X on island Y. You know, that then it will be specific enough that you can actually come in and say, you need to enlarge on this discussion here, or this is absolutely not clear, or, oh, by the way, I added up the numbers on this table and they're not right. Something's wrong, you know, check it and fix it. We get comments at that level of detail on a draft document. Once the comment period on the draft document closes, we have two main chores. We read and consider and debate as a team all of the comments on the draft, and where revisions are appropriate and necessary to the document, we make those. We also produce a comment response document where every issue that's been brought up is responded to. And that comment response document becomes a part of the final EIS, and they are published together. Does that help clarify? Did I go over the, I probably covered that way too quickly earlier. But that is the basic process. The contractor team is pretty large, specialists in a wide range of analytical areas. The team also includes representatives of the various cooperating agencies and commenting agencies, and a number of us from the Department of Energy in different offices and with different technical specialties and experiences to bring to the table to try to create the best integrated, most understandable and usable document that we can. But this is fundamentally, a planning study is a paper study. It's to bring information together and to provide a basis for us in decision making. And I hope, I can't guarantee this, but I hope that what I'm leading the production of will also be of use to the state of Hawaii and to the communities of Hawaii, informing their opinions as they move forward in solving these problems.
The time is getting, we've got, maybe it's 7:30, so we'd like to, anyone have to make a question?
I want to thank you all for providing this question and answer period. It is really important. People just want to come up with their idea. But to remind you, none of what you said is going on record. I think it's important that we move on to the record part. A comment I want to make is, like when Juliana, you said several times that no specific projects and no specific sites have been identified. For example, windmill projects. I just want to say that maybe the developers and some of the politicians are a couple steps ahead of you. Because a big reason why many people are here is because specific sites and specific projects have been identified. For example, take a look at the White Cross on the island of Lanai. The legislators have considered bills regarding, I think, big wind and cable. It seems that some of us are really concerned that the windmills might be out there before the PEIS is finished. And, you know, I understand what you said that the PEIS is a federal document for a specific purpose. So again, the reason why many people are here is to voice our concern about the projects moving forward while the PEIS is, you know, just being discussed. And thank you.
Thanks for your comments. As far as the timing of this, excellent comment. Excellent comment. The reason why we're doing this now is because we're hoping that this will take less than 18 months. We're going to try hard, and The process right now is I'm sure you're well aware, ECO has a draft RFP for 200 megawatts in power. There's a cable component of that. And if that moves forward at the pace that's going, a contractor wouldn't be in place and contracted. It would more than likely be about 6 months after this process concludes. So hopefully, before anything would get built that would be affected by this programmatic, the programmatic would be adopted and in place. That's what we're shooting for.
And that specific project would require a separate PEIS?
That's correct. That's correct. Absolutely.
I'd like to, if there's no other questions, because this is the most important part of the whole meeting, it is to take your formal comments, and I appreciate the gentleman's comments about needing to be on the record. Many of you made, your questions are really great comments, and I hope you bring them up and put them on the record. So with that, we're going to take a 5-minute break, because we're going to let the court reporter come up to the front as we begin to transition into the formal public scoping process. So the restroom is in the back. I think there might be some water, but we'll take 5 minutes. We have a court reporter, so I just wanted to kind of go over some protocols. We have a court reporter who's taking down everything that you are saying. It is really important when you come up, if you could state your name and actually spell it so that the court reporter gets it accurate. And she needs to see you speaking. So if you can look to the audience, but also if you can make sure that the court reporter is getting everything that they're saying. And I would ask that we have one person speak at a time. I know that some people will want to respond to what someone else has said, but we want to make sure that we respect that person who's talking and that we get everything that that person has said. So if we can let one person speak at a time. Obviously, this is a really important matter to all of you because you are here. So I want to make sure that we give an opportunity, everybody who wants to speak, a chance to speak. So if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you if you could limit your comments to 3 minutes. If there's an opportunity, we've got time left, you may come back up and speak again. I've got Greg here who's going to be our timekeeper, and if you don't mind, I hope you aren't offended, but he's going to let you know when you've got 1 minute left, and if you can begin to summarize your comments. And again, it is really important that we hear your monotony, so I'd like to encourage, if you haven't signed up, we have the list here. If after everybody has spoken and you feel moved to speak, we're going to give you an opportunity to speak. But we will have to leave here, I think, at 8:30? By 8:30. So we've got an hour and a half to cover all of you who want to comment. And let's just, I really have appreciated that I know this is a very passionate issue, and I've appreciated everybody's respect and courtesy to one another. So with that, I will call up the person who's going to have to come up and speak, and I will call up the second person, and if you can come up front, because you will be the next person. So the first person on our list is Henry Curtis, and after Henry is going to be Kat Fraser. Okay? And after Kat will be George. So Henry?
Thank you for hosting these meetings. I saw a video of your presentation at college. You talked about including all reasonable alternatives, and I look forward to seeing that in the draft. The reason I asked about clean energy is under the Hawaii revised statutes, under the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative, and under the Programmatic PEIS, no definition of clean energy. Now, we do have a definition of renewable energy. It includes chopping down the Amazon rainforest to grow biofuels, or the Borneo rainforest for palm oil biodiesel. But that's not my definition of clean, or green, or renewable, but it is the state's definition. The other curious thing about the state definition, they seek 70% RPS, renewable portfolio standards by 2030.
but it's possible under state's definition of RPS to get 2,000% renewable using only coal. So that's another definition that really needs to be cleared up. I hope that the EIS, the draft EIS, while it looks at all the different technologies and all the different islands, it identifies places that should be excluded, both land places and water places. Obviously, there are cultural sites that should not be included. There's a channel between Lanai and Molokai that has some very precious reefs. Homer did a Bureau of Ocean Energy Management did a great study on what is there, and I hope that that area is excluded. I also hope that in your travels on the Big Island, you're covering the west side and the east side. I hope you drop down to Na'alehu, where we have a major fight going on. I hope they have 1 minute left to their fight and they win. But I hope that you stop down there during this trip, or at least informally, and meet with them, because there are a lot of people there who really have valuable input and need to be at the table. Thank you.
We have Kat, and then George after that, and after George will be David Benton.
Aloha, my name is Kat, K-A-T, Brady, B-R-A-D-Y. Aloha community, thank you so much for showing up and speaking your mind. And thank you to the Department of Energy. It's too bad that the first EIS didn't actually follow the law and look at all the alternatives. So we're really happy to look at everything, because we are a small place. Everything is precious here. Every bit of land is Hawaiian land, and that has to be first and foremost. So you probably know that Hawaii is one of the endangered species capitals. We have more things that are extinct and threatened than just about any other place. That is why everything is really important. Every piece of land is really valuable. Our ocean is the last frontier. The problems that the community continues to have is that the state pushes their way. For instance, the cable has been something that's been really rammed and jammed, and when the community objected, then the legislature came out with a new bill that was really like the old bill. They called it a new bill, and it was basically to push their way. And the one discussion that we have never had in Hawaii that we need to have is, should we all be connected so we can all black out at the same time? Or should each island be energy self-sufficient? So if you're going to look at all the different islands and the different resources that each island has, and the different pahikana, which are special places, we hope that that's part of the discussion, that you actually look at distributed generation. When I see the poster that says utility scale, it makes me kind of sick, because it's all about these huge, massive projects. And, you know, some of our islands, like the Big Island, the communities are very separated. And we think that, you know, running miles and miles of power lines is probably, well, not only does it despoil our environment, but it would probably be better if we could have communities be energy self-sufficient. It would also help energy efficiency, because if the energy produced was more local, each energy could actually see how much energy they're using, and it would help in the whole scheme of energy efficiency, because people would be more aware of how much energy they use and for what. So we ask that you look at distributed generation really closely, and at the resources and impacts on each island. And thank you for being here. Welcome to Hawaii.
Thank you, Kat. Next is George Nita, and then David Benton.
back again. Again, there are other ways other than windmills to make energy. As you know, I stated I'm against windmills that make it ugly. Anything is better than that. There's also a new waste to energy machine developed in London, and I am meeting with that person this month. It turns waste into energy, making electricity with no smoke, nothing. So as far as the Waimanalo Gulch and the rest of the rubbish dumps, we call that, it will be a thing of the past. We want to start this project in Honolulu first, and then go out to our islands. And this one is not a power plant that is like Hawaii Electric, where it's one speed. This power plant is variable speed. So when you need more energy, it revs up and makes more energy. When you don't need it, it comes down. So it's variable, like you're driving your car up the hill, you step on the gas. Come down the hill, you let off the gas. And at first, when I talked to this guy, it didn't sound so good, but the second time he called me, made sense. So he's coming in this month on the 20th. And we'll see, and I would highly recommend it. This is a good project to look into this, getting rid of waste and making energy instead of windmills to make energy. Okay, let's keep Hawaii beautiful, as I stated before. I love these islands. Please, keep it beautiful. Aloha.
Is Diane Presa and Gabriel Barsotti.
We believe that the PEIS should cover, amongst other things, three particular areas. I have 3 minutes.
Can you speak directly into the microphone?
I am.
Turn it up a little closer.
I can hear you better.
Okay. I represent the Hawaii Hang Glider and Paraglider Association. We paraglide for the last 40 years and hang glide on all islands. This includes Lanai and Molokai. It would be a severe economic impact and physical impact to fly through a windmill blade. So we ask that you study the effect on our recreation. On 911, today is the anniversary of 911. If you build this cable, $1 billion cable that has the entire state depend on electricity, you are just making that a target for a terrorist attack. I could probably take it out with a good-sized sailboat and anchor, but certainly more sophisticated people will try and take it out with that. I think that any system that is that vulnerable that it can be taken out by a simple item, just breaking the line with a cable, breaking it with going to an anchor is not energy security. The third issue is tax. I'm tired of subsidizing people like Larry Ellison and his business. That's essentially what our tax system does. When we spend tax money to give him a break for building windmills so he can sell us electricity at outrageous rates. I checked with the state. They've got some things where they are paying the state contracted at the height of the dollar, the oil price, to pay 38 cents a kilowatt hour for electricity right now, way above the cost of production by other methods. So we ask that you study eliminating the $4 billion tax credits given to oil as one method of getting people off oil. I remember vividly in 2006, we had a storm here, knocked out power on the island. I live in Waimanalo. We came out, worked the next day, we had Hawaii Kai. Everybody in the electric Hawaii Kai had their cars parked all over the streets because they're so energy inefficient that they couldn't get them in the garage because the garage door openers didn't work. We don't need electric garage door openers and air conditioning for the whole island. And we certainly shouldn't put windmills on Lanai so that people in Hawaii Kai
Thank you, David. Diane, and after Diane will be Gabriel, and then Susan.
humbly come before you to share some of my thoughts and concerns about windmills on Lanai. And thank you for taking the time to hear my testimony. I'm going to share something personal, and it's just for you to understand, to get a snapshot of how we live over there. This is a concern for not only Hawaiians, but for everyone that lives there. It's not just for Hawaiians. So living on Lanai has its challenges. We may not have all the conveniences as you do on Oahu. We don't have the luxury of running to Foodland when there's a sale on hamburger. But we can go to the ocean, and we can fish, or we can hunt for our deer, and we can have supper that night. We don't have Costco gas here, so-called. It's cheap for us, Costco gas. But we don't have that. But we don't have to sit in gridlock. We don't have to. We can get to where we need to go without that. If the weather is bad, we have no barge to bring in supplies, but we can rely on our family and friends who would surely share with us everything they had. We may not have dinner in a movie, but we can stop by the neighbor's garage and talk story and laugh. We may not enjoy all the things that you do here on Oahu, and that's okay. Our life is simple, and we love our life there. When my kids come home from school here on Oahu, they come to Lanai and they breathe the air. Oh, Mommy, it smells so good over here. That's what they say to me, and I want to cry. Because I understand how they feel about the passion for that island. When I fly over on that plane, I look at the island and I want to cry because I think, oh, all of that's going to be lost if you put those windmills there. It will. My dad was a native Hawaiian and a fisherman. And we went along the coastline and he showed us where the heiau was, where the fishing spots were according to landmarks on the land. So that land is so very important to us. My concerns for the PEIS is that Lanai is too small to support an industrial wind project. Development of such a large scale is asking too much of us. The area is filled with native Hawaiian cultural sites and threatened and endangered species. It has historic value and the scenic view plains are magnificent. Please consider the runoff of displaced dirt into the ocean. Please consider the inaccessibility to hunt, fish, gather, and meditate. Consider the potential fire hazard of having windmills at Ka'a. Please focus on energy independence for each island. Eliminate the cable. We don't want windmills at Ka'a. Explore alternatives, please. Don't make us your battery. So what is our legacy, Hawaiian legacy on Lanai? What will we leave for the mo'opuna that we will never meet? Will they forget what it was like to be Hawaiian? If we destroy Ka'a, what will they have? What will they breathe in? Thank you.
Next is Gabriella, and then Susan, and then after Susan is Carol. Gabriella? Okay. This is Susan?
Susan Osako. Susan Osako, O-S-A-K-O. I'm just amazed to see so many people here from Lanai. What I'd like to share with the community is to consider these things when evaluating what energy technology is appropriate for Hawaii. Some lands here in the state of Hawaii are so archaeologically and culturally significant that the DOE must identify these areas and exclude them from large utility-scale power plants. Lands such as the Ka'a'ahupua'a on Lanai, which is the proposed industrial site for the island, these lands are rapidly disappearing. They remain the last, best, pristine places in Hawaii. They are living museums, the last natural vestiges of Hawaiian history and culture. Large-scale utilities that involve structures like wind turbines, but not exclusive to them, on a small island will not only destroy the last open view plains, but will have a huge negative impact on the local population. The island of Lanai is the smallest of 5 islands. Mega turbines and other large industrial structures take up massive amounts of our precious acreage to produce a small amount of intermittent power. Huge areas of the island will be off limits, and lifestyles that go back to the beginning of humans on these islands will be obliterated. The people of the island now survive on fishing and hunting. That way of life will disappear forever. The land can never be destroyed after it has been dynamited and bulldozed. A graveyard of rusting relics will cover what was once a pristine, life-sustaining island. There are technologies out there that will not do this. Why would we put a permanent structure up that's so destructive when we know that tomorrow there'll be something half its size? And technology changes so rapidly that 2 years from then, there'll be something even half the size of that and more efficient. Any technology that we install must be removable with minimal damage to the ecosystems because of fast changing technological advances in the field. The Department of Energy's focus must be on making each island energy independent through the use of things like building code mandates for technology and conservation and efficiency. We need a new energy distribution model, not a self-serving expansion of the existing model that will not meet our needs in the future. Please do this right. Do not allow projects that will make industrial wastelands of 2 of our most endangered islands, Lanai and Molokai. Do not promote the destruction of culture, history, and way of life that exists nowhere else. Mega industrial projects like the wind and the undersea cable have proven to be a perfect medium for graft and contract peddling at the expense of taxpayers and ratepayers. Covering the islands with hundreds and hundreds of mega projects will not efficiently meet our energy goals. They will not decrease CO2 emissions or significantly decrease the amount of fossil fuel used. The DOE needs to focus on energy independence for each island using that island's resources.
Next is Carol, and then after Carol is Donna Stokes.
Aloha. My name is Carol Deshay Truman. I was born and raised on Lanai. Mahalo for the opportunity this evening to add my voice to the many others who are requesting that these programmatic EIS documents include a requirement that the process identify lands that should be excluded from consideration. As a native Hawaiian and a native Lanaian, I respectfully request the Department of Energy identify to exclude from industrial and utility scale proposals lands which include native Hawaiian cultural sites, as well as areas of historic value and those areas with significant scenic view glades. Please also include areas with threatened and endangered species. Lanai's unique heritage, plants, and history make this imperative. These precious resources must be respected, preserved, protected, and made available forever to allow for traditional practices such as salt gathering and fishing. As a native Hawaiian and Lanaian aware of our precious past and the legacy we may leave future generations, I humbly request the Department of Energy focus on making each island energy independent. Combined with energy efficiency measures, each island has sufficient renewable resources to eliminate and preclude the use of an unnecessary undersea inter-island cable with the potential for long-term negative impact on the ecology of the ocean floor. Excuse me. Finally, we specifically request the Department of Energy Energy identified lands to exclude from industrial and utility scale wind proposals, especially in light of the disproportionate impact of scale of limited land mass and rural lifestyles. Lanai should not be used as a pawn to feed Oahu's or any other island's increasing demands for more and more energy to run city lights and air conditioners. Lanai's unique rural lifestyle and abundant dark skies must be cherished and maintained. Our native Hawaiian trees, plants, and species, as well as Lanai's rare peace, tranquility, and lack of urban noise must be safeguarded. I respectfully reiterate our request that programmatic EIS documents include a requirement that the process identify lands, such as those found on Lanai, that should be excluded to protect and preserve our precious island forever. Mahalo.
Thank you, Carol. Next is Donna Stokes, and after that is Carol Alter. I'm sorry, too many Carols.
My name is Donna Stokes. I came from Lanai to speak for my ohana and our future generations of family to come. The island of Lanai is only 13 by 18 miles small. Ka'a is the largest, most significant, and most abundant ahupua'a on our island. This is the area that you choose to destroy. In this day and age, we have to protect our areas of significance and abundance and not destroy them. This ahupua'a also includes the only and largest 1.5-mile secluded white sand beach on Lanai. We will not let this area and our lifestyle be degraded, desecrated, and destroyed just to meet Oahu's increasing electricity needs. Our Hawaiian community strives to keep this particular ahupua'a healthy and intact for future generations to practice their heritage, cultural gathering rites, and spiritual beliefs. We hunt, fish, and gather there because it is still abundant, whereas other areas on Lanai have been used and abused, have been depleted or covered with erosion and silt from previous ranching and plantation use and is no longer abundant. If you destroy the ka'a ahupua'a, you will be adding insult to injury. You will be ruining our only area of abundance, a place where we still practice our culture and Hawaiian gathering rites. Ka'a helps us to live our life the Hawaiian way, a healthy way. It's healthy. On Lanai, we don't have fast food restaurants, major supermarkets, shopping malls, or recreation centers. Yes, the land and ocean are our food cabinets and refrigerators, and it's also our recreation centers. Department of Energy, David Murdoch, PUC, and Hawaiian Electric, you must not destroy our island, our resources, and our Hawaiian way of life, for we are a small Hawaiian and minority community, and we all depend on this land and ocean resources to sustain ourselves physically, mentally, and spiritually. We have nothing else. Without these resources, we will perish. We need what's left of Lanai. We need the ka'a ahupua'a intact, and we will fight to preserve what's left. Oahu needs to learn how to conserve their use of energy. Many offices on Oahu have air conditioners blasting, and the employees actually have personal electric heaters to keep warm. And at the state capitol, it's so cold, everybody has to wear jackets or sweaters. That is a tremendous waste of energy.
So I say again, we oppose the windmills because it will create irreversible damage to Ka'a, to our way of life on Lanai, to our cultural sites and gathering areas, to our food and medicinal sources, to our native birds and turtles habitat, to our rare and endangered native plant habitat, and to our only and secluded, abundant white sand beach and pristine reef. What will you, the federal government, do to protect and preserve all of this for Native Hawaiians and Lanai's future generations? Our solution is simple. It's a no-brainer and it costs a lot less. Photovoltaic panels on all of Oahu's public buildings and no windmills on Lanai.
Next is Carol Atun. And then after Carol, is Denise Snyder still here? No. Okay, she left. After Denise will be Warren Osaka.
Aloha everyone. My name is Carol Atun, A-H space capital T-O-O-N-G. Although my comments are site specific, I hope you'll be able to deduct what I feel are important considerations for all areas. You speak into the microphone. I thought it was. Take it off close. Okay, thank you. Is that better? Yes. Okay, thank you. Okay, I live here in Neva on Oahu. I'm a former resident of the island of Lanai. I understand the value of lower electric bills which Oahu residents would receive from neighbor island energy sources transported by an undersea cable, but my small electric bill savings is certainly not worth the huge burden inflicted upon Lanai and Molokai. When I lived on Lanai during the 70s and 80s, I belonged to a nonprofit organization called Hui Malama Pono o Lanai. We regularly hiked with friends, family, elders, archaeologists, botanists, and entomologists all over the island. With the proposed windmills, residents would be denied access to 1/4 of the island. That's huge. With the scientists that we hiked with and Lanai's kupuna, we saw rare and endangered native flora, archaeological sites, the remains of an ancient flightless goose scattered in the area of the proposed windmills. It's critical that these areas be preserved and kept open for all to experience, learn from, and have access to, especially Native Hawaiians to practice their heritage and culture. Lanai is way too small a land area to lose access to 1/4 of it. The visual impact of the numerous gigantic windmills scattered across the land will destroy the beauty, peace, and mana of the land, as it's already done to other islands. That's a price far too high to pay for the meager savings on my Oahu electric bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Warren, and then after Warren is Deborah Delacruz.
Hello, my name is Warren Osaka. Born and raised in Hawaii. Live there today. I'm really glad that we're having this hearing in this building because we're talking about efficiency and conservation. If you notice, it's open to the trade winds. We have fans, no air conditioning. If you want to open the doors, you have to go and open them. And yet, our state government and some of the other governments have taken this ability away from the people. They have electric opening doors, electric flushing toilets, paper towel dispenses electrically. What are they doing to add to the efficiency and conservation of energy? We also heard about resources. Lanai is actually quite a fragile landscape. At the time of initial contact with Western civilization, the population was estimated to be 6 6,000 Native Hawaiians. Today, the population of Lanai is around 3,000 people, and our resources are strained. At the last public meeting on water, it was brought out that the maximum sustainable yield of our aquifer was 6 million gallons a day. And they stated that if Castle and Cook completed build-out of all their projects, the consumption would be 7 million gallons a day. Would that make sense? And I didn't prepare any statement before I came, but I looked around. I noticed on one of the panels back there is a seal of the state of Hawaii. And I walked back there to make sure that the state motto was still on the seal. Uamao ke'ea o ka'aina i kapun. The life of the land is perpetuated in righteousness. In spite of this, our governor has advocated suspending environmental review for certain projects. As we as the people of Hawaii should recognize that our leaders are not helping us. And for all of you people, when I talked about this building, how many of you work or do your business in air-conditioned buildings with all the conveniences, and yet this is what we expect the children of Hawaii to live with. I think we should take the children of Hawaii as an example and recognize that if this is good enough for them, it should be good enough for the rest of us. If we're really concerned about conservation and efficiency. Thank you.
Is Kelly King here, or did she leave? The next after Deborah will be Kalana.
Hello, my name is Deborah Dela Cruz, D-E-B-O-R-A-H, D-E-L-A-C-R-U-Z. I was born and raised on Lanai. I'm a homeowner and live there full time. Lanai's economy is based on high-end tourism. It depends on fewer, higher-paying guests rather than a large number of tourists. They come to Lanai for the peace and quiet, a glimpse into the olden days, and the natural beauty. There are only 3 paved roads coming out of Lanai City. Visitors love to take the north road and head out to Keahi Kabelo, otherwise known as the Garden of the Gods. If the wind turbines are built, instead of seeing a wonderful view of Maui and Molokai, they're going to be overwhelmed by 410-foot structures. And instead of being impressed by the view and seeing whales breaching in the channel, they're just going to be overwhelmed by the noise and the sight of the wind turbines. So what effect will the wind turbines have on high-end tourists? You could probably afford to vacation anywhere in the world. They would be looking at what is essentially a wind energy factory, taking up a large part of our island. Lanai has little man-made entertainment. Many people hunt and fish for both recreation and food, which is expensive on Lanai. Try $9.49 a gallon for milk. The wind turbines are going to be spread out over much of Lanai's prime hunting land. The Lanai hunting experts said a bullet can travel 4 miles. With Lanai being only about 18 by 13, I don't expect that hunting is going to be allowed near the windmills, despite assurances to the contrary. Lanai is basically one big mountain and everything flows downhill. If the wind project goes through, tons of dirt and rocks will be displaced. There will be clear cutting around each wind turbine and possible herbicides used to keep vegetation down. How much and what kind of pollutants will be flowing into the waters that are fished and where endangered monk seals and turtles live. Some other concerns about how will our native Hawaiian cultural and historical sites be preserved, and how much noise can we expect in town. We enjoy the absolute quiet of the night, and we don't want to lose that. I watched a panel of experts discuss Hawaii's energy future on PBS last year. They proposed trying many energy resources, chasing anything that will help meet the self-imposed energy targets. If wind turns out to be the least cost-effective, do we become the wind turbine graveyard? To me, the most important point brought up in that program is that it's difficult to site wind projects on Oahu. Not because there aren't sites, but because of NIMBY, not in my backyard. Isn't it more economical to put the wind projects where the energy is needed and making each island self-sufficient? Are Lanai and Molokai to be sacrificed because our voices are small? So I too am saying, not in my backyard. And I know this sounds sappy, but I just ask you to remember that my backyard is very small. And I can just get in my truck and drive over to enjoy somebody else's backyard if mine is ruined. One last point, you keep saying you're going to go look up data for each place and try and, use that. And I say good luck, because they always lump Lanai in with Maui County. So you're going to find very little of Lanai. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Deborah. The next is Kalana, and then after Kalana is Luella.
Hello, my name is Kalana.
Could you take the mic and hold it in your hand? I think that works better. Thank you.
I've lived on Lanai most of my life.
Your mouth. Sorry, thank you though.
Most of my life, genealogy and generations on this island.
Hold on, I'm sorry. I can't hear. And I really want to get everything you're saying. I'm sorry. Thank you for your patience. This one is better? Okay. Try again. Thank you.
The Oahu of Hawaii provides me and my family, as it did for my father and for my grandfather, who taught me how to fish, hunt, and all natural cultural resources in the traditional way, passed on by my great-grandfather to the people. I'm teaching these practices to my two sons. The big wind project in these Apua would end that way of life. I depend on these Apua to put food on my table, to support my wife and my two children, and maintain my family's connection to the land. The majority of our diet comes from the sheep, deer, and fresh fish, and other stuff we gather along the coast. Me and my family's emotional and spiritual well-being is tied to the well-being of these resources. The entire coastline surrounding Ka'a and Pomai is our life source. I have seen how the development on land damages the ocean on this island. Such damage has an impact on me and my family's well-being. Your study must also look at how the project you support will affect each of these things at all stages, from construction through the operation of the project. Your study must look at how families like mine will be harmed by the actions that you take. You also should study how the project you support will affect access throughout the Apua of Ka'a and Hawaii. There are trails we use to get to the ocean to fish. There are trails that we use for hunting. There are trails that we use to access our cultural sites like fishing ponds and for spiritual purposes. I don't understand how these access ways will remain open to us if the project goes through. The big wind project will change that area forever. What happens when the towers stop, the turbines stop running? We have to live with the effects of digging 3 stories deep into the ground for each tower. How will that damage ever be repaired? Who will be here to clean up the mess? I need answers to those questions from my children and the children after them. As Ka'a and Kauma'i support me and my family in the community, I support and care for Ka'a and Kauma'i. I work on projects to restore the native home and dryland forest at Kalikuni Preserve. How will your actions affect that dryland forest? Your studies must answer these questions. It is my honor to make sure that cultural sites there are not damaged or affected. How will your actions affect these sites? Your study must answer all of this. And for the record, I will live with this.
Now, sister, 3 minutes. 3 minutes? I know you got it. I know, I'm going to sit there. Okay.
I'll do it in 3 minutes. First of all, in 1977, Salkamo Halahala took a lot of us from Luella, Leonardi, Leonardi. Okay, Salkamo Halahala took us to Lanai in 1977, and he took us on a tour to where your windmills are on that little map there. We returned in 1978. What happened here is from Manila Bay, I believe that's the name, we left Manila Bay to go to Okanaloa, Kohimalamaha, on a religious access. We walked from Kealikuhiki to Honokanainai, all the way over to Hakiwalaba and back again, Pucklong 95341. That's the religious access. So thereafter, there were many protests, one being ocean thermal. They were going to build 3 concrete, the size, 3 of them, the size of football fields off of Namikuli. And that was for ocean thermal. Okay, and then we had the geothermal, and they were going to tap into Peli, and that's when we said steam is water, water is steam. So we've come a long way as far as utilities. I'm a strong advocate for houseless. And what we're looking at in Waianae is not more contracts with utilities. What we're looking at is no contracts with utilities. And the people that are teaching us this, that we can live without electricity or minimum electricity, are houseless. They know how to hook up these batteries to solar systems. They know how to live without lights. They know how to live without electricity. I feel that our houseless children today will be teaching the future generation how to live sustainably. Thank you.
Pono Kealoha, and then after Pono, he said Momi or Moni? Momi. And after Momi will be Laura.
Hi, aloha. My name is Pono Kealoha. I understand that you are new to the islands and you don't have any idea about Hawaii or culture, but you've been studying, working with the Indian tribes back in the U.S. It's kind of ironic speaking from McKinley High School because they have a statue, I don't know if you saw it before you came in, and it has a little document in his arm, and that is a treaty of annexation that never happened. And so you have to understand that it's a lot deeper than where you guys are coming from. I'm looking at my future generations and what they're going to be faced with. Our resources being prostituted. and they're left out on the street. Our island is a beautiful place. You try and keep it warm. And what you're offering to do is turn it into some amusement park. That only benefits the few, not the many. If you need more information, I suggest that you look up HawaiianKingdom.org. They also have what is known as a full aid petition that we're going to be going to Washington, D.C. next month. And these are our Kapuna that spoke up against annexation. And they stopped it from our Queen Renewable Island. So I really suggest that you get to know our history before you come in all over our islands and leave us with a lot of problem. Okay? You want to know more? Please Google Pono Size. P-O-N-O-S-I-Z-E. Mahalo.
Momi, and then after Momi is Lauren, and then Shannon Woodley. Okay, so after Shannon is going to be Christine.
Aloha, my name is Momi Suzuki, and I was born on the island of Hawaii. I run the Renewable Foundation home in Hawaii.
Can you speak more into the mic?
Okay.
Thank you.
This year, we had a great amount of hunters on Hawaii. They hunted for axis deer, moose fawn, and maybe the reason why there were so many, they thought maybe there would be no one. I grew up on venison, one of the best proteins that you can get in your diet. Anyway, it did help my business and a huge added income for our community. Windmills would greatly increase my business and other local businesses that depend on the hunters. I am of Hawaiian descent. My great-great-grandfather was the last Punahiki of one of our 13 ahapuas on the mountain. And ahapua means a traditional land division, and there were 13 of those on the island. Our island is small in size, 141 square miles. I read also 139 square miles. Well, anyway, 1/4 of the island would be placed with 117 windmills for their own. This would be harmful and damaging to an island this small. In 1851, Walter Murray Gibson herded 30,000 goats per night. Today, we still see this horrible and awful effect of this overgrazing. An earlier disaster, run up into the ocean. We can't let this happen again. 200 significant historical sites are located there. The Lanai Culture and Heritage Center is a living museum showing where these sites can be found and cared for. It is great to have tourists at the center to view films of Ki'ahi Pakarelo and Ka'a and hear them say, "Hey, I've been there. That's awesome. It's so beautiful there." But all of this will be lost forever if there is coming turbines built there, moving the open serenity. Since the grand opening of the Cultural Center in 2010, they have had 35,000 visitors, and many of them cannot say enough how beautiful the island is and how much stress has been taken off their shoulder. They feel so relaxed, they want to stay. So I asked the Federal Department of Energy, identify this special ahapua of Ka'a and Ha'omai and reserve this area for construction. We want our land intact preserve our native Hawaiian cultural sites, our momentous views, and save Kanuku, where our native trees and plants grow. Thank you very much.
And then Christine, and then Patricia.
Hello again, Ms. Jane. My name is Orin, O-R-R-I-N, K-U-P as in Paul, E-U. Can everybody hear me all right? Okay. Ms. Jane, the community of Lanai have clearly spoken this evening. No windmills on Lanai, and I support them, and I will fully the Castle Food fails on this venture on behalf of the people here this evening from Lanai. I will wait patiently for the final draft of the PEIS to see if this community comments were really considered while drafting it. Mahalo for this commenting scope, process, and period. My question then, will the DOE include in its PEIS a special preference to Native Hawaiian co-op energy projects and local cooperative projects in regards to renewable energies, i.e. mass transportation or any other projects that would not allow foreign or multinational corporations of the United States to come in here, profit off of the little money that we do have and possess economically and take it away from us and take it back to Boston, Florida, wherever else New York, wherever else they take it. Find a way to keep the money being paid by our local residents with these utility-sized wind farms, retain it in the corporate offices and headquarters that belong here in Oahu. I support renewable energy solutions, windmills included, but not on the limited land base that our island home possesses. But I am strongly against fossil fuels and their corporate parents whose greed makes fuel prices so unstable, not only in Hawaii but the rest of the nation. I do support individual island self-sufficiency concept. I suggest, in my opinion, offshore wind turbine projects developed and maintained, managed by Native Hawaiian cooperatives, because that's the only thing Congress gave us back, was Kaho'olawe and the submerged lands. A feasibility statement, feasibility assessment is going to be developed with the help of the SBA to see if offshore wind turbine processing facilities or energy producing facilities can be accomplished, but only with the Native Hawaiian best practices concept, not with the corporate New York minded concept of for-profit. Jobs need to be created here in Hawaii and stay in Hawaii, so that's why in my first question and answer section, I asked what you guys' position was in feeling about Native Hawaiian cooperative businesses being designed for Native Hawaiian benefits, because it'll trickle down to the rest of the corporate world here in the islands that we have to fight against, struggle against. I humbly ask the U.S. Department of Energy to put the state in check somehow for this PEIS so that they cannot continue driving by their agendas for public interest or private interests. And I am aware, I've worked for the government 8 years in the legislature to the governor's office, and our voices aren't heard. They're being ignored. And Mr. Representative, please remember, the community has spoken as well. So if you're not from Lanai, you can talk to your Lanai colleague and inform them of their position. I also support mass transportation to utilize the oceans, which our ancestors have used for centuries, and use a modern-day ferry system that the English utilize to transport our traffic problems in the island of Oahu. But we got rail instead. So one day they'll learn, and one day we can work together to unite and make these goals a reality. Okay? All along.
Patricia, and then Martha Evans.
and I am from the island of Lanai. I am a citizen of the sovereign Hawaiian Kingdom. I grew up running on the reefs on the shorelines of Pauamani and Mahana, Oahu. I remember one day my grandmother said, "Hala, Grandpa's sick, we gotta go beach." I asked Grandpa, "If you're sick, why we gotta go beach?" He said, "Because the ocean water makes me feel good. The ocean is my medicine." From the Ahupua of Pauamani is the Ahupua of Ka'a, the location that is planned for this so-called neighborhood project. Within Ka'a is a place called Palihua, the largest sandy beach of the land, where Pele ate the delicious flesh of the sea turtle, where history of a Hawaiian village of heiaus, burial sites, and koa fishing shrines still remain, where an anthem was written confirming the use of the maneva neva as a leyland. Ohu ohu, Palihua, ika maneva neva, kale kaumana o ka'aina, Palihua adorned with maneva neva, the celebrated wreath of the land. And Nanai, child of Ka'una, honored is the maneva neva, magnificent on the chest when born, on the sacred breast of a chaos child. Maneva neva is found nowhere else on the island except at Palihua. Palihua continues to be a place where the people of the island gather their food. What will be the impact to the lifestyle of the people? Where else will we withhold our rights to gather, prohibit, and rob us of the people's healthy lifestyle? Keahiakavelo, a place that is so breathtaking, a place where we can view our sister island, Molokai, and a place where our spirits connect to the land. Can you feel it? This is what it will destroy forever. Willy trees flourish in the hidden ravines of Ka, as do other native trees, such as the Nayo, Opua, Ahakea, and medical plants like the Puakala. I recently showed a photo of the Puakala to a group who visited from Oahu and heard great sighs. "Oh, I haven't seen a Puakala in a long time." It is used for medicinal purposes. Are you going to be protected? Are they going to be protected from the destruction of excavations? Are they going to be buried by dirt, debris, rocks, and cement? Do you think about putting them in an arboretum? Tell us to plant it in our backyard or transfer them to another location? No. Ka'a has been there for many centuries. Lanai is home to many endangered and threatened species such as the Hawaiian petrel or Oahu, where it no longer exists on Oahu. But genetic testings have revealed that the Lanai Hawaiian petrel was closely related to Oahu. Will they and other bird species populations that use Lanai as a flyby be driven down by these ridiculous, monstrous machines? Is it right to compromise the take of these species? And I think you understand the take permit. I allow you to take down this much birds. No. I refer to a brochure produced by the United States Fish and Wildlife Service. Okay. Why save endangered species? The Congress agrees to the preamble to the Endangered Species Act of 1973, recognizing that endangered and threatened species of wildlife and plants are of aesthetic, ecological, educational, historical, recreational, and scientific value to the nation and its people. Let me tell you, Hawaii is a nation. Do you have the right to compromise what exists in our living environment? May I remind you that these species were here way before man and continue to lose their habitat. Developments have been robbing and raping our lands far too much and not putting anything back for the mere sake of economics and corporate welfare. This is what you will be doing to an island that is only 18 miles long and 13 miles wide. We are a people that need the land, the water, and the ocean to be sustainable. We live on an island in the middle of an ocean. Is this cable going to feed us? Right now, in my time, I do not want this for my children and my grandchildren and the next generations. Conservation is still the solution to being sustainable. Let's get back to basics. When we take care of the land takes care of us. Let us take care of our mountain watershed, control erosions from entering our shorelines, so we can help the reefs recover and our ocean can start to provide us with more food. Let us plant canoe plants from the ocean to the mountains so that we have food as the great ancestors did that provided for thousands. Let us break back agriculture. As we water, we're returning water back to the land and being fed at the same time. Let us capture the sun, the old technology that is still the best solution, as did Maui, who slowed the sun down so his mother could dry her clothes. Let us have a vision of the paradise that once was and still is for the islands of Lanai and Molokai, where we continue to see scenic, open views, where people from afar come to meditate. This is a solution that's always been there. We just need to revive it. This is sustainability. Mahalo.
Next will be Patricia, Martha, Stacy, and Anella. We have four more speakers. If anybody who hasn't spoken would like to speak, and remember we've got until 8:30, so we've got 20 minutes left. So Patricia and Martha.
Aloha. After hearing the monologue from our cousins on Lanai, I'm going to get right out here and say I was born on Oahu. I was raised in Kalihi. In fact, my dad was student body president here at McKinley High School. But I am here, I am an attorney and a former judge, and I am here because I dedicated those skills that I have to Hawaii's renewable energy future. I think we're in an economic crisis because every year we export $7 to $8 billion to pay for oil. I believe we are in an energy crisis for all the reasons we're all discussing. We are here this evening because the state and the Department of Energy signed an agreement in 2008, in January of 2008, and where they were required to create energy performance working groups and create also 2, 5, and 10-year energy performance plans. The partnership was to identify financial, regulatory, and policy activities needed to ensure a sustainable energy future. This all sounds good. However, also in 2008, Governor Lingle, executives from HEI and HECO, directors from DBET and the Consumer Affairs Department signed another document witnessed by the Department of Energy. That document is 44 pages long. The purpose of that document was an agreement among all of these parties to support a stable electric grid and to ensure that the electric utility is financially sound. As I said, attached to the 2-page agreement that was signed after the agreement that brought us all here this evening is a 42-page plan that the state pledged to support and that HECO outlined. What then is left for the Hawaii state and the DOE to discuss at this point? What's the purpose of working groups, timetables, and other measures when those issues are resolved by a separate agreement in 2008? And who is missing from these agreements? Let's answer that question. Well, there is window dressing mention of the interests of the ratepayer, there is no concrete attention to how the interests of the ratepayer are to be considered. We all support a renewable energy future. That's a no-brainer. We have heard more times than we wish to hear that we, the ratepayers, that's us, pay the highest rates for electricity in the nation, but nobody mentions that among the 50 states we use the least amount of electricity, which means we pay the highest and we use the least. So if one of the 2 primary goals of the agreements among these various entities is to reduce usage, what shall we do? Okay, we can deal with the capital, the folks wearing sweaters. But what about the other folks that we've been hearing about this evening? Those who have self-imposed blackout periods during the day where they don't use electricity. Those who are choosing between paying their utility bill or their rent or their mortgage. How much lower can we go in usage when families are making these critical choices? The ratepayers' interest needs to be integrated into any PEIS in a fashion that is realistic and not merely philosophical. We all support renewable energy, but our support is not a blank check to pay for renewable energy at any cost. For example, the conversion to biofuels, the cost that the conversion to biofuels will bring about. Think about this logically. If it is cheaper to bring food that is grown in multiple places across the ocean to Hawaii and sell here, how is it going to be economically feasible to grow the crops that are going to be used to make biofuels?
We have 7 more: Martha, Stacy, Anella, Daviana, Stuart, Mike, and Mary. So Martha and Stacy are the next 2 speakers.
Aloha, kahiani. My name is Martha and Napua Ukalani Haya Evans. I was born and raised on the island of Oahu, and I was a resident of the island of Lanai for 35 years. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to share my thoughts and concerns. Lanai lies in the shadow of Maui and Oahu, always taking the backseat to the wants and needs of these 2 larger islands. Have either of these islands, or rather the people who currently live on these islands, including me, and those who call themselves decision makers, have they ever considered what is best for Lanai and Molokai? How can desecration of sacred sites, cultural viewplanes, and both near and offshore resources be best for our island home? This industrial, utility-scale proposal that impacts cultural and historic sites is unacceptable. To top it off, it is last century's technology. We are too small, and our resources are too unique and too significant to our history to be devalued and cast aside. A friend with generational ties to Lanai, still to this day, walks along the shoreline at Polihua to gather the precious salt in the same manner as our ancestors. Aina, that which feeds. Although not native to Lanai, the axis deer and mouflon sheep provide sustenance for many of our families, especially during these tough economic times. Shoreline fishing, casting, and diving supply island families with limu, fresh fish, and shellfish. This is wise stewardship of the land, not the construction of a mammoth wind power generating facility, which in the end will net only a small fraction of the power needed for Oahu. As a native Hawaiian, I understand that it is from this aina that we derive our sense of place. It defines who we are and who our children will become. I speak the names of 3 winds in the Ahupua'a of Ka'a. Ho'omoipili, Ma'a'a, and and Nauru. Will you know and honor these traditional names and winds which you wish to harvest? What ancestral knowledge will you use to determine where best to place your industrial-sized giants? Do you even care? As you consider this project, please remember the story that our Aina shares. I am vehemently opposed to this plan, which will forever change this precious landscape. Wise stewardship? I think not. Best use of the Aina? No. A one-way cable at ratepayer and taxpayer expense is not a sound solution. 70 miles of cable between Lanai, Molokai, and Oahu will cost us at least $3 billion, when the 350 million mile voyage of NASA's Mars Curiosity rover cost only $2.5 billion. Pursuing this obscenely expensive project means that taxpayers, that's all of us over here, will pay 65% of the development costs for industrial scale wind on Lanai and Molokai. And people, wind is not even a reliable supplier of firm energy. I support clean energy, but I do not support the current plan, which calls for this mammoth abuse of our treasured Aina. I demand that the PEIS demonstrate that the construction of these windmills is the best and most efficient use of our land. I demand that the PEIS demonstrate that wind is the best alternative source for energy. I demand that the concerns of the Native Hawaiians and Lanai residents be addressed adequately and appropriately as part of this PEIS. I do support clean energy, but I do not support the current plan. Instead, why don't we work to make each house, each neighborhood, and each island energy self-sufficient? That should be our goal. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
And then Anela Evans, and then after Anela, Daviana.
Hello, testing. Aloha, my name is Stacy Ko'anui Nefalar. Nefalai. I am of Native Hawaiian ancestry and raised on Oahu in Waimanalo. I'm a wife, a mother of 3, I have 1 grandchild, and I'm currently a 20-year resident on the island of Lanai, in which my maternal family dates back several generations. We, as people of Hawaii, have a responsibility to our past, our present, and our future. We learn from our past and execute what we learned during the present for our future generations. People of the past didn't consume more than what was needed. As Hawaiians, we were taught to take care of what was given to us, the land, the ocean, the wind, everything in them, and never take more than what you need. If you care for it properly, you can grow food, hunt, and fish, and have clean water. You cannot harness or control one of them without destroying the others. For instance, if you try and harness the wind by building monstrous wind turbines, there's a ripple effect. The destruction of the land to build and install these bases would remove any and all traces of artifacts and Hawaiian history of our declining native people, causing runoffs into the ocean, killing and destroying our reefs, ocean life, and the bleeds could cause certain native birds to be extinct. not to mention destroying the land forever, eliminating the possibility of ever being cultivated. Our lands are so scarce and slowly disintegrating, we cannot afford to lose and destroy them anymore. If we look back at our past again, choices that people made in our past cause irreplaceable damage to our native animals, native plants, native people, and our simple way of life. Just because our simple way of life may be considered too native, not ambitious or motivated enough, doesn't mean we're ignorant or lazy. It just means we're not driven by money or greed at the expense of others, but by our families, our values, and who we are as a people of culture and heritage. Hawaii and its people have always been sustainable even before the invasion of foreigners. Sustainability, that's what will help us not be so dependent on other countries. America needs to place more of its trust on its own individual people and not so much in corporations and big businesses to get us out of this recessive economy. We need to be wise and mindful of big businesses and corporations, unions, and government officials who aim to make a lot of money on these energy projects. Money, especially big money, tends to make people do things which are not necessarily in the best interest of others. We also need to work together to come up with non-destructive ideas and solutions for our environment. I was able to bring down my electricity bill by over $100 a month. I noticed and I cut back on unnecessary usage in my home. My electric bill was over $400 a month. I went down to last bill was $311. What I do is I teach my children to notice their energy use and how they can do things differently to use energy more efficiently. I heard several times that what was mentioned here was specific projects have not been identified, but we're not out of the woods. Since the sale of Lanai from David Murdoch to Larry Ellison, it included the rights to a wind farm, so we're not out of the woods. And also our Senator Kalani English, he threw us under the bus and publicly said, it's definitely a no for Mordecai, but a yes for Lanai. I said, our Senator Kalani English threw us under the bus and publicly said, it's definitely a no for Molokai, but for Lanai, a yes. So we're not out of the woods, and our government is not listening to us. So we're here to hopefully somebody will hear us and help make our economy better without destroying our land and our environment.
Thank you. You know, we have 5 more people who wanted to speak, and I want to be real respectful. I know a lot of you have come here regarding the money, but we do need to vacate here by 9 o'clock. We've got to put all the tables away. So those of you are going to have to help us in Koku, okay? But the last 5, we have Anela, Daviana, Stuart, Mike, Mary, and Kepa. So we have been, we've tried not to cut anybody short, although I stood up. But please remember that we really have to come up, leave by 9. So, pardon? The 6 names are Anela, Daviana, Stuart, Scott, Mike, Mary, and Kepa. So Anela, 6. Okay, 6. Anela, and then David. Yeah, I know. I'm okay. All right. Well, let's have Anela and then Daviana, and then after Daviana is Stuart, and then Mike, and then Mary, and Kepa.
Aloha mai kakou. My name is Anela Evans, and I was raised on the island of Lanai. Mahalo for this opportunity to share my perspective on the industrial wind power plant proposed for the island. Just to be clear, I support any effort that will in fact move Hawaii on a deliberate, responsible, and appropriate path towards energy efficiency. Notice I said responsible. I do not, however, support this project because its limited benefits come at much too great a cost to the legacy passed on to us by our ancestors, our aina, our way of life, and our future of the island of Lanai. Lanai is my home. Although I don't currently live there, it still remains my people, my connection to my kupuna, my ancestors. Up to 22,000 acres of my home island is being proposed to be used as this industrial power plant. And it will be, the ahupua of Ka'a will be irretrievably disturbed by the development of these windmills. On this dry island, no one talks about where the water is going to come from to lay the concrete pads. We have no water. Water is our most precious resource. That's the source of our wealth. We don't have much of it on Lanai, but we make do with what we have. If these windmills come in, that'll deplete a lot of our water resources. The project is only expected to produce a minimal amount of Oahu's energy. It will wreak havoc on our landscape, destroy numerous cultural sites, replace hunting grounds, and limit access to the ocean for food gathering, and impacts fishing grounds as well. I grew up in that ahupua. My father took me there every day when I was learning how to drive. And on Lanai, you don't learn how to drive when you're 16. I knew every rock in the road, every puka in the road. And even though driving is not culturally significant, to us, that was visiting the land. When we were driving, my father would tell me stories of how he rode horseback, where he went hunting, things like that, where they could find certain trees, certain hunting grounds, where there were arc sites that he stumbled upon, etc. Future generations, my children, when I have children, will not have that opportunity if this wind farm is developed. Mahalo.
Daviana, then Stuart, and Mike.
Aloha. I'm Daviana, Pomaka immigrator, and I'm a professor of ethnic studies at the University of Hawaii, Manoa. And I live here on Oahu and on Molokai and care for Kaho'olawe. I would like to suggest that in developing the programmatic PEIS, that there are principles that can be adopted to guide the process. One is that each island should be energy self-sufficient. We shouldn't be looking to having Oahu be supported by the industrialization of our important cultural kipuka on Molokai and on Lanai. The second is that the plan needs to address not only the 40% of the oil that's imported that's used for electrical generation, but the 60% that's used for transportation. And that's the real need in an energy self-sufficiency plan. And very little attention is given to that. And in looking at that, we understand that from the oil processing, there's a residual sludge of oil, and that's what's used largely in the generation of electricity. And if it's not used for generating electricity, then it would have to be transported elsewhere with great potential damage to marine life if there's any kind of accident in the transport of that crude oil. So there is until we solve the transportation problem, we're not really going to be able to address the energy generation, electric generation problem. The third is that the plan needs to assess the special impacts to Native Hawaiians as the indigenous Hawaii. And that would mean that there would need to be a federal cultural impact study conducted. And I have, in conjunction with a colleague who was at the time the dean of the School of Social Work, and another colleague, John Matsuoka, and another colleague, Michelle Minervi from the Department of Urban Regional Planning, we produced this, what's called the Hawaii Externalities Workbook for the Energy Research Group for the Hawaii Electric Company, the Maui Electric Company, and the Hawaii Electric Light Company. And this was done because the integrated resource planning process in 1996, I think is when it was being done. This was completed in 1997. But that process acknowledged that as the indigenous people, there are special impacts of the generation and distribution of electricity to the native people. And so this workbook was done to show what are the various ways in which energy generation and distribution will impact Native Hawaiian cultural practices and customs. And I offer this to you as a guide because it was very thorough analysis of all the potential kinds of impacts. And then what we did was, because they wanted us to come up with a way to monetize the impacts, and we said you can't put a monetary value on the impacts to our cultural practices and beliefs. And so we came up with a system to map where are the cultural sensitive areas, the lands that are ancestral lands, the native species sites, and conservation lands. So if you look at Hawaii, for example, which everyone is talking about tonight, you can see that the area that there is of concern is a very important culturally sensitive area according to this mapping. But it shows the cultural sensitivity areas for all the islands. And then also, my time is up, but I want to talk about, there's another study that I was involved with the three gentlemen, the other two professors, and as well as with Pulani Kanakaole and Mary Kelly, and that is the geothermal cultural impact study. And it was done to assess the impact of generating geothermal energy on Native Hawaiian cultural and spiritual beliefs, customs, and practices. Because the geothermal study the geothermal process never was completed, and the entire, the project was stopped by a lawsuit. And at that time, Governor Caetano signed an agreement that the state would not, in his term, take up geothermal project or a cable project during his term. And I think those suits, the basis for those suits have still validity. But this study was done for the EIS. The EIS was not completed because the geothermal project was stopped at that point. But the cultural impact study was completed because we talked to all of the kupuna. We wanted their mana'o to be represented. So I advise you that you also use that study in your assessment, especially with regard to geothermal energy generation. And I would be glad to make that available to you, hard copy or electronically. Mahalo.
The last four are Stuart, Mike, Mary, and Kepa. Now please, if you are not able to make your comments, you can always write them. But let's take these last four.
Thank you. My name is Stuart Scott. I am a pro bono consultant on climate change and sustainability. I am also a farmer. I've lived on Oahu since 1987. The last time I testified before the DOE was in 1978 when Jimmy Carter was president, and I was the first environmentalist stockbroker on Wall Street. It is amazing to me how far we have failed to come since then. I agree that each island should be energy independent. I believe projects that distribute energy production should be favored over those that concentrate it. The wealthy corporations and individuals prefer the latter. Government tends to favor the preferences of the rich players. We and our children face two immense threats: climate change and what is called peak oil. Climate change is well known. known but has been effectively obfuscated in the public mind and all but ignored by government, thanks to moneyed economic interests, most notably the American fossil fuel lobby. Peak oil is less well known. In plain language, we are beginning to run out of oil. The DOE knows this, as evidenced by its own Hirsch report, commissioned by the DOE and released in 2005. The ramifications of peak oil are huge and will be made more chaotic the longer we delay a coordinated response. We are still in the early stages of a meaningful response. I believe and will firmly state, as I did in 1978, that conservation is the simplest, most cost-effective, lowest-hanging fruit on the tree of energy security. It is a solution to both climate change and peak oil. But we are a society of individuals and institutions addicted to wasteful consumption of material things, energy-intensive conveniences, fossil fuel-based transportation, and the like. We can solve both of the huge problems of climate change and peak oil at the same time. Put a price on carbon emissions. This can be done by taxing all carbon fuels at the wellhead, at the mine, or at the port of entry. Distribute all of the money collected back to the public on a per capita basis to offset the increased costs of energy, fuel, and goods. This proposal originated with Dr. James Hansen, the first government scientist to sound the alarm about climate change in the early 1980s. Putting a price on carbon will quickly promote conservation habits and technologies alike. For the sake of our children and their children, please put a price on carbon. Thank you.
We haven't even given the court reporter any break, but can you handle pouring out 3 more? Okay, we've got 10 minutes, and we're going to take these last 3. Mike, Mary, and Bob.
Aloha again. My name is Mike Dewert, D-E-W-E-R-T. I'm with the Environmental Caucus of the Democratic Party of Hawaii. I am the chairman of the Energy Subcommittee. I'm also a working scientist. I have a degree in theoretical physics, so I'm used to engineering calculations and physical analysis. In our Environmental Caucus, we are concerned about the Big Wind project. We're concerned because of the environmental and cultural and social impacts. And we believe that if we're going to ask our fellow citizens to bear these impacts, to see their island covered with wind turbines, we need to be darn sure that it's cost effective, at least, for the people of Oahu. I live in Kailua. I could possibly benefit from big wind. And so I asked myself the question, in a hard-nosed engineering calculation, is big wind really more cost effective than solar photovoltaic on my roof would be? The answer came back, no. When you account for the cost of the cable, the cost of the wind, and the cost of buying oil while you're waiting for wind and cable to get built, you're much more better off buying solar panels today, and that's what we did. We put solar panels on our roof, we got fuel-efficient appliances, we changed our light to be efficient, we put fans in our ceiling. We don't sit in the dark and swelter and not watch TV. We're very comfortable. We got solar, we make more energy than we use. And what's true for me is true for all of Oahu. If we, as citizens of Oahu, next week took all the money that they're planning to put into big wind and cable and put it into solar photovoltaic, we could be employing our fellow citizens next week to install solar, and the week after it's on the grid. We're not waiting. We're not paying for oil in the meantime. And so what I'm trying to say is, with our caucus, we're concerned about the environment, but we're just with hard-nosed engineering calculations. Wind and cable from Lanai don't make sense. Buy the solar photovoltaic
pay for?
$60.
$60.
16.
16. Okay. $16, 16 as a teenager. $16 dollars a month. Possible. Okay, my name is Mary Ginger, G-U-I-N-G-E-R, and I represent the environmental caucus of the Democratic Party. Therefore, I also represent the Democratic Party, and I would like to have you know that they voted unanimously to do an objective evaluation of sustainable energy to prioritize the alternative energy systems. And Michael is an example of that. So when you take a look, to me it's kind of like a consumer guide when you want to buy a car. You look at the consumer guide to see, okay, so what do you have here? And as far as, so you get your facts, you get the efficiency, and you get what you want. And that's true in the Democratic legislation called objective evaluation of sustainable energy, is that that's true for each item. So we want facts, and we want facts for each island, because each island has the right to decide.
Last speaker is comment is Kippa.
Hello, my name is Kippa, K-E-P-A, last name Malley, M-A-L-Y. I'm only going to take a minute. We've heard a lot of stories, and a lot has been tied to Lanai this evening, which is really important because Lanai is often overlooked, underheard from, and so it's so heartening to see so many Ohana from that island come here, spend the money to get here tonight. It's that important. We're talking about things, and as Professor McGregor mentioned, this is an example. Trustees of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs supported a program for a small community grassroots nonprofit heritage program on Lanai to conduct an ethnographic study of one traditional land division. That study resulted in, and this is Lanai, remember, it resulted in a study of just about 400 pages of historical documentary narratives, traditional Hawaiian language accounts, historical events describing the landscape of Lanai, things that had never been heard before, except from the very oldest of our kupuna on the island, the last of whom are now 95 and 96 years old, and those of their ohana who have gone before them, that were the sources of many of these traditions. I don't say stories, these were the mo'olelo. These were the stories of their life, the history of the kupuna that came from before them, and how they named the land. So this is available as an example. This is one Oahu, and we need to do these kinds of studies seriously. The reason that Onalama, my wife, and I actually chose to do this one, this was paid for by the grant. The archaeology that we're doing as a community nonprofit was paid for by the grant. This was done for Aloha because we knew that if people weren't dealing with Hawaiian language materials, that they weren't going to be getting the full story. Kupuna were writing their stories and their traditions because they wanted them known and passed on, not so that they would be forgotten. This account is available at lanaichc.org. It's called Ka'a Ethnographic Study. And just take a look at it. You'll be amazed at the stories and traditions that have been handed down. And there are many pukas, and more knowledge has been passed down in some areas. Lanai, Warren Osako mentioned just real quickly, population statistics, 1793, 6,000 people, 1823, 3,000 people, 1832, 1,600 people, 1848, 600 people, 1893, 175 people living on Lanai. That many of the ohana here that are married to descended from Hawaiians on Lanai, like those ladies right there and stuff, that they have survived is a freaking miracle in itself. You know, and to have these histories here is so important. And so we need to recognize that the island is more than just a commodity. That it is the way of life. It is the only life. Everyone else has someplace else to go to. Hawaiians, this is it. And so what I'd suggest, hope is that as a part of the PEIS, and which I was really afraid of, it seemed like everything was just going to be jumbled together and sort of overlooked. I've heard you say that that's not going to be the case. I hope that you will require, that the Department of Energy will require detailed ethnography and a detailed understanding of the cultural landscapes. I know I said it was going to be long, but let me just tell you one quick story. This is Lanai, Keahiakawelo. It is a historic place on the landscape at which a priest from the island of Lanai lit a fire in response to a fire that was burning on the island of Molokai. Molokai's priest, Lani Kaula, in this account, was praying to death the people of Lanai. Kawelo lights his fire, burns that fire to ward off the prayers from Molokai at Lani Kaula itself, the place now bearing that name. And eventually, Kawelo learns a secret, and he is, in this Lanai account, able to defeat Lani Kaula, and he takes a bit of Lani Kaula's kukai, his excrement, and burns it on the fire at Lanai. And from that fire, a black smoke erupts, and it must have been in Nauru, one of the southerly winds blowing across the landscape at that time. That black smoke erupted out of the fire, and we know where Keahiakawelo is, where that actual swamp is. It erupted from that fire, went across the forest, and turned the liquid blossoms of that region of Lanai purple. Unheard of throughout the islands. That view plane, though, it's more than the biggest pile of stones and bones that make a cultural place significant to the native people of this land. It is even those view planes to look from Keahiakawelo to Mokupo'oliki, a little island, a speck of island from Lanai, off of Molokai. That view plane with this all in front of it is no longer has the mana that it has today if you view it. I'm sorry, Jane, yes? Thank you for coming to me earlier. Jane, you need to come to Lanai. People need to come and be touched by Lanai. When we sit in this kind of crowd, it wastes time now. It just burns up the energy. So, LanaiCHC.org,